All right, hello and welcome to this Tuesday edition of Technopoverty. I'm Henry, once again without my co-host Lux. Things have been a little warbly with the interspace engine. I fear they'll see what I mean? The bigwigs are doing something with just the fabric of everything, but you know what? We're going to try to restabilize everything with continuing this playing of Death Stranding 2. We've been talking about Octavia E. Butler's Parable of the Sower. We're now on Parable of the Talents. Typically, when Jacob or Lux are here with me on the couch, Technopoverty is an excuse to read books, play video games, bounce the two off each other with you, the chat. Just because I don't usually do this kind of station ID, but perhaps this is what's upsetting the bigwigs. Hi, Technopoverty happens every Monday and Thursday at 7:30 p.m. CST, every Tuesday at 3 p.m. CST. As I just said, books, video games, you, the chat, we kind of hang out, bounce everything off each other, see what context brings, and just help talk about culture in the current moment. Maybe we rummage through the news some days, maybe we don't. But today, we're going to be catching up on some YouTube essays because I think there's some context, 90s neoliberalism stuff that, for Parable of the Sower, Parable of the Talents, before reading these books, I was pitched them a lot as like, this is something that predicted MAGA, this is something especially prescient to the now because of Donald Trump. This is something I've been hearing for the past decade at this point. It's 2026. Since 2016, I've been hearing well-meaning folks pitch these books as a means of understanding the current moment, and they definitely do help you understand the current moment. I do think, though, that something Butler even acknowledges in the work itself is these problems started way before 2015, and they're sort of systemic features of the American character and American history. There's a video I shared on our Discord about Bill Clinton I'm about to fire up right now that sort of I think will help provide some understanding as to what was going on in the 90s that Butler may have been reacting to or acting off of. Yeah, oh man, bigwigs and the Know Nothing Party are at it again. Shakes fist. But yeah, I haven't made more progress since last night on Parable of the Talents. I'm just going to fire up this essay. For quick reference, this is going to be... It is titled, Why I Blame Everything on Bill Clinton by Been a Minute. And I think this is the first Been a Minute video I've ever seen. Walked away pretty pleased with it. Anyways, let me make sure I get that right on screen for y'all. And yeah, it's gonna be a bit of a loose session today. Let me know what's too loud, what's too quiet. Actually,
billions, and abducted the sitting head of state of a sovereign nation. And precisely 2 days before that was January 1st. A few days ago, I watched our president applaud a military strike that killed at least 40 civilians and abducted the sitting head of state of a sovereign nation. And precisely 2 days before that was January 1st. And do you want to know what Trump's New Year's resolution was?
Man, before we get too deep in the weeds on this video and start rambling about mid-90s cultural issues that are possibly being played off in the Parable books, sorry, it's my sinuses have been up today. It's very weird weather here in Texas right now. My enunciation seems particularly bad right now. But man, you mentioned Walkabout. We're going to be walking about Australia. Walkabout, the Australian independent film from the 70s. I'm going to go ahead and throw that on our to-watch list. That'll be part of the Discord. But yeah, let's continue.
This is a guy who spent the entirety of the election cycle spewing bullshit about how he was the anti-war candidate.
They said, he will start a war. I'm not going to start a war. I'm going to stop wars.
How we needed to be America first and stop meddling in the affairs of other countries. And it's not just Trump, of course. I feel like my entire life I've been subjected to leaders who say one thing and then do the exact opposite. I've made videos about Obama's unfulfilled promises to hold corporate cronies accountable and Cheney's baseless accusations of WMD to justify war. In the age of alternative facts, it feels almost quaint to imagine a world in which political leaders actually stood for something. But there's one man in particular who I think really
How
changed
are the levels?
and a quintessentially American president who even to this very day we've never quite been able to pin down. And that's the man we're going to be talking about today. So strap in, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the wild, wacky world of Bill Clinton.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
It depends upon what the meaning of the word is.
I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it. And didn't inhale, and never tried it again.
Hey, it's been a minute, and welcome back to How the Did We Get Here? Today's episode focuses on America's 42nd president, and the only one to ever dog a hog helmet, Bill Clinton. This is just a side note, but I find myself fundamentally incapable of respecting a man who wears an inflatable hog hat on their head. I feel like if MLK or Mandela or Jesus Christ himself put on a hog helmet, their entire aura would just shatter into a bajillion pieces. Anyway, I wanted to talk with you all about Old Slick Willie today because this is a video series about understanding the present. And the timing for Bill Clinton's influence on my life is really unique. On the one hand, he was the first president of whom I have zero memory of actually being president. I was a certified baby during the Clinton administration. And to the best of my knowledge, Barney was the leader of the free world. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't exactly a political junkie during the Bush years either, but I had at least gained sentience.
Lux is out.
I mean, even as a teenager, I had enough sense to recognize that the man who don't talk so good shouldn't be the most powerful person on earth.
You fool me, we can't get fooled again.
So yeah, in some ways, Bill feels like the blank pages before the first chapter of the book. And in the words of Shakespeare, the past is prologue. It's like if I could just
But this essay on Bill
guy,
Clinton is relevant to something I want to bring up about Butler once we're done with it.
But then there's this other strange quality about Bill that is really interesting, which is that he never really went away. His legacy lived on in the next decades through his policy and through Hillary, seeping into the 21st century in ways that we'll discuss in greater depth in this video. Even today, he still sort of haunts the Democratic Party like this ancient, creepy ghoul, always popping up at the most inopportune times, like when he was invited to speak at the 2024 DNC.
Please welcome the 42nd President of the United States,
I'm just gonna let that
Bill
hang.
Clinton.
But wonderful, good to know.
And we wonder why Kamala seemed out of touch. This guy doesn't scream hip to you? Or how about just a few weeks ago when pictures of him in the Epstein spa surfaced online? No man should look that relaxed in the pedophile pool. I mean, look at him. He's just chilling in the pedophile pool. My point is that Slick Willie is sort of everywhere and nowhere all at once. Ubiquitous in the public consciousness and yet always just beyond our grasp. That's why in this video, I want to try to nail him down. We're going to dig into some of his signature choices and policies that have defined his life and politics, and we're also going to analyze how those choices have manifested today. Also, we're probably going to be making a lot of Bill Clinton pervert jokes because, let's face it, I just can't help it, Hillary. It's low-hanging fruit. All right, let's do this. Now, before we dive into things, I actually wanted to take a look at this document. Now, at first glance, this probably looks like it was ripped straight.
All right, I am going to pause for a moment because I've been neglecting to revisit the Pizza Chef. So let's see what we're rewarded with. I feel we're gonna get some scenes. After this, we gotta figure out the inventor guy.
Look, sir, there's a door over there.
Ooh, the bib is happening. Whoa, 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 whoa. Oh shit, what? Dude, I just wanted a pizza.
Oh, that was a close call. But why would there be ghost mechs inside the Pizza Chef's facility?
You know what, Jari? I don't remember. I watched part of it. I'm not sure. There is a detail he gets into about the type of labor they used when they were in the governor's mansion in Arkansas, which I think is all too easily forgotten. I'll fire that essay up once the cutscene's over. It's Luigi Primo.
From making my pizzas.
Where's he get the cardboard boxes from? Ooh.
Those who dare disrespect pizza do not
of relief.
Maybe it's a good thing I waited till I got the good truck, because I feel like I'm gonna have to do deliveries for this guy.
You must be Sam. There's something I would like to give you. I'll need a moment. Please wait at the delivery terminal upstairs. Sam.
Just the last pizza oven in Australia. Memorus. Wait, then is that it's supposed to be as in Memoru Oshi?
So what was that? Martial arts?
A form of karate I invented while honing my craft.
Karate, huh?
Pizza dough acrobatic karate, to be correct. Let me ask you, Sam, what, in your personal opinion, is the single most important factor in serving good pizza to one's customers?
Oh no. You cook it? Season it, maybe?
It is the delivery man. Without him.
That is Memoru Oshi. I didn't know what he looks like, but holy shit, gang.
Sorry about
The director of Ghost in the Shell himself.
Which means that you're the real pizza chef.
Indeed.
So what exactly happened?
Writer of Jinro, The Wolf Brigade. Pat Labor.
I didn't notice those fiends breaking in. After they imprisoned me, they used an imposter to...
Yeah, groundbreaking animation director.
My pizza deliveries were just a cover to smuggle weapons. A scheme in which I was their unwilling accomplice. But I had faith that someone would eventually put a stop to it all. Thank you again for saving me. I mean you did. You know, there are very few who could hold their own against me as well as you did.
Sorry, I'm just like triple checking that because I'm kind of amazed that, I mean, it's not that I wouldn't be surprised if Memoru Oshi's in a Kojima game, considering how influential Ghost in the Shell is on Metal Gear Solid on so many levels. It's just, wow, pizza guy. I've been neglecting him. We've been watching your movies, sir. I'm so sorry.
I'm going to increase your materials allocation.
I will happily take all your materials for the roads.
Read this. It will help you to learn one of my secret techniques.
It's funny too because this is the most indulgent, campiest, cringiest kind of like game being like its most goofy aspect to it, and like these are two very producers of like very serious cyberpunk work. But I think it gets at something I was talking about last night when it comes to misreading Metal Gear Solid 2, where the text is taken much more seriously than even the creators intended it to be. Oh, he put in serious Fallout 4 hours too? See, I'm totally blind on that.
You already possess the necessary foundation. The enemy stats, where they are. For instance, you can quickly Well, Sam, the essence of while observing your
I do just full Luigi Primo
in preparation, via
pizza fighting.
you learn. But someone with your potential should have no trouble at all. Pizza chefs hone their craft with, but I find it functions just. Try tossing it at an enemy. If you manage to strike them in the head, they will suffer no permanent harm, of course.
Okay.
I intend help me come back.
Will do, sir. I'm a big fan of your work. I don't know if you just forgot or would rather do this instead of create groundbreaking animation after the whole Death Stranding, but we're going to get back to listening to Bill Clinton now.
Out of the Epstein files, and all of the redacted sections say either Donald Trump or Bill Clinton or both. That's actually not what we're looking at here. This 11-page report is an example of the staggering amount of information that data brokers collect about you and then sell. It has your address, relatives information, both your emails, even your possible neighbors, which is just insane. And I find it extremely frustrating that due to a lack of regulation here in the US, you basically have to choose between living off the grid or giving up your privacy. But those don't have to be your only two options. And that's why I use today's sponsor, Aura. They take charge and do all of the hard work of removing your info from these sites for you. They also monitor your personal info, including, and they also sit down your information to try 14 back to it. To understand Bill Clinton, the president, you have to understand Bill Clinton, the person. And to do that, we have to travel back in time to 1946, Hope, Arkansas, where a baby named William Jefferson Blythe was born. Look at how cute and chubby he was. By the way, this just lends further credence to my theory that all babies are cute. Baby Bill was cute, baby Hitler was cute, baby Tom Brady was cute, and those were like the three worst people ever. Anyways, baby Bill's father tragically died in a car accident 3 months before his birth, so he was raised mostly by his mother and grandmother, both of whom, according to Clinton's biographer, David Mirandis, doted over him and thought that he was gonna be special. His stepfather, Roger Clinton, whose surname Bill adopted, was an alcoholic and womanizer who verbally and physically abused Bill until the age of 14, when Bill challenged Roger to stand and face him. So yeah, he didn't have an easy upbringing by any means. He certainly wasn't wealthy nor privileged, and leftist Twitter might hate me for saying this, but I actually came away from my research really admiring young Bill. Admiring, you say? No, Bill, not like that. Young Bill had two attributes in particular that really struck me. First, his mom and grandma were right. He really was special. He was a striver. Georgetown class president, and then Yale Law, Rhodes Scholar, governor of Arkansas at 32 years old. But beyond accolades, and more importantly, Bill Clinton had something else. Nearly everyone who interacted with him agreed that Bill Clinton had the juice. Call it charisma, intrigue, magnetism, or the exact f***ing opposite of whatever Jeb Bush has.
Please clap.
It was the juice combined with a dogged ambition
He
that
was
led
the
Bill
sort
Clinton to
of
ascend to America's highest office
factory
at just 46
formula
years
perfected
old. The
store
third
brand
youngest person to ever
JFK.
do it.
You
The second
know,
thing
after
that I
a few
truly
decades of
admired
trying,
about
they
young
got
Bill
it.
was that he actually seems to have been
Reagan
fairly
was a bit
principled.
too fast.
He was raised stridently anti-racist
But Clinton was a
in
nice
Southern
enough
state in the
package for people to
70s,
think he
with his
was
parents selling
something
goods
new.
on credit to their black neighbors in defiance of lingering segregation policies. He was also anti-war, as evidenced by this letter a 23-year-old Clinton penned. He writes, "I did it for the experience and the salary, but also for the opportunity, however small, of working every day against the war I had opposed and despised with a depth of feeling I have reserved solely for racism in America before Vietnam." He demonstrated an understanding that the government can help people, raising taxes in his first term as governor to help fund state needs like road maintenance and educational reform. However, as Bill aged and as he became further and further entrenched in the political landscape, you can see these political principles start to atrophy. I think a focal point for this was his loss in the 1981 gubernatorial race. Publicly, Clinton joked about being the youngest ex-governor in America.
I became overnight, I think, the youngest former governor in the history of the country.
Privately, however, he reckoned with the prospect of his political career being over before it even began. As biographer Mirandus notes, Clinton typified the saying, "Rhodes Scholars are brilliant young people with a very bright future behind them." For someone as ambitious as Bill, that simply just wouldn't do. Let's face it, he was not a man who could make a career turn into being a saxophonist. Bill became obsessed with reclaiming power. According to quotes from his campaign team, Clinton was fixated on polling, shifting policies to respond to slight changes in public perception. And it worked. Just 2 years later, he was back in the governor's mansion. And a decade after that, he was elected president of the United States. By that time, though, I think that Bill had completely betrayed a lot of the ideas that had grounded him in his youth. You can see it in his later
mask for mask.
years,
It is
battling teachers' unions to institute competency tests,
although I've heard more popular anti-ICE sentiment than I was expecting,
taking
and that's been
advantage of slave labor by
like
having black
legitimately in
prisoners
places
work as
where I've heard
unpaid
people
servants in
giving
the
people
governor's
shit for
mansion.
masks.
Hillary
you know?
once wrote in her 1996 book, It Takes a Village, that using prison labor at the governor's mansion was a long-standing tradition, which kept down costs. No, Hillary. Just because it was a long-standing tradition and it kind of kept down costs doesn't mean that it was okay to have slaves. Bill Clinton had transformed into someone who was willing to do or say whatever it took to maintain power. Someone who would betray his ideals in furtherance of his own personal ends. And as you'll see in the next section, that kind of person with Bill's kind of juice in the Oval Office is very, very dangerous. In the lead up to the 1992 presidential election, Bill Clinton and his team looked to rebrand the Democratic platform to include a tough-on-crime message that would compete with the racist fear-mongering that Reagan made his trademark in the 1980s.
If victory is ours tonight,
Yeah, he just made Democrats more like
I have
Nixon.
been given something that few people get in life, a second chance to serve the people.
During Bill's second stint as governor, Arkansas would execute its first 4 inmates since the United States Supreme Court reinstituted capital punishment in 1976. Friends from Bill's teenage years and former students of Clinton's at the University of Arkansas Law said that he was an ardent opponent of the death penalty in the 1970s. But when he made his jump into politics, his view on capital punishment moved to support. The culmination of the shift involved the execution of Ricky Ray Hector, an Arkansas man who murdered 2 people before attempting suicide by gunshot that left him effectively lobotomized with an IQ of 63, according to doctors. In 1992, Bill Clinton was campaigning in New Hampshire for the Democratic presidential primary when he flew back to Arkansas to assure the public that Hector's execution would continue as scheduled, despite pleas for his death sentence to be commuted through Clinton's power as governor. Ricky Ray Hector's last meal would go unfinished, as he told correctional officers who came to escort him to his lethal injection that he was saving his dessert, pecan pie, for later. Sure, Bill may have completely abandoned his principles and willfully sent a disabled man to the grave, but hey, all that selling out helped him book his ticket to the White House in 1993. Backed by Clinton's White House and championed in the Senate,
I'm not sure at what point it becomes the kind of neoliberal orthodoxy to be like, well, if I didn't do the bad thing, somebody from the other side would beat me to doing it.
Belying the assault weapons
I feel
ban
that may
and
be
the
more
violence
towards the
against women
Obama era
provisions
when it
included
starts
in this
coming to
bill.
like the war in
Clinton crime
Iraq
bill
and drone
increased the
strikes
amount
and
of
all that
federal
kind of
funding
stuff.
police departments and prisons would receive, added 60 new death penalty eligible offenses, eliminated incarcerated people's right to seek higher education while serving prison sentences, and created the 3-strike policy that would lead to non-violent offenders serving life sentences. That's the kind of progressive legislation that could reanimate Dick Cheney's freshly buried corpse. Its passage would lead to more people being jailed for longer sentences with less opportunities for rehabilitation.
No way, come on.
We covered how politicians of the 1960s and 70s laid the groundwork for mass incarceration with chilling success through the war on drugs and other racist policies in the Why Are All My Friends White video. And Clinton's crime bill only stoked the already raging fire and made it okay for future Democrats and Republicans to keep wading further and further into the right-wing deep end. By upping the ante on their tough-on-crime policy, Democrats made it easier and more enticing for Republicans to go all in on their tough-on-crime policy and enact even more punitive measures on the people they deemed criminals. As we've seen in the past and as we see today, when you try to meet fascists, racists, and religious zealots in the middle, they seize the opportunity to push their agenda further in the direction of extremism. Remember back at the beginning of this video when I fantasized about the days politicians used to believe in things? Well, believe it or not, the Democratic Party actually used to believe in things as well. The New Deal Democratic Party that emerged after World War II was a pro-labor party. It bargained on behalf of the middle class and enacted government welfare programs which provided a social safety net for the poor. But then along came Bill. And Bill took one look at this proud tradition of pro-labor, pro-worker, maybe people shouldn't starve to death in the wealthiest country on earth, democratic politics, and said, what if we just didn't do that? See, the problem was that the old Democratic Guard had been losing bigly. It seems almost inconceivable today, but in 1972, McGovern lost 49 states. He had a pretty sick poster though. Then 12 years later, Walter Mondale also lost 49 states. By the time
I really need to find some good nonfiction on the Democrats in the 80s. I've been considering, I think it's Reaganland, the Pearlstein book. If anyone in chat has any recommendations, I really do wonder,
despite
just
sounding
from
like a
Carter to
rejected
Clinton.
tantric sex position he tried to pitch Hillary in the 80s.
I've read
was
encyclopedia style, history book style kind of survey overviews, but kind of what in specific led to such a rotten decade would really interest me.
And instead became the party of Wall Street.
Especially because in speculative fiction, like sci-fi writers, I think they were really onto something. You can see it with Butler, you can see it with Gene Wolfe, you can see it with
corporate America loved and American manufacturer workers loved in the same way you love getting hit by a bus. The deregulation of Wall Street, including the repeal of Glass-Steagall, a common-sense law essentially designed to stop banks from gambling with your money like your drunk Uncle Talbot at the casino. You can learn more about that in my 2008 video. The gutting of welfare in the name of balancing the budget. Bill took our social safety net and just set it on fire. And then somehow he got credit for revitalizing the economy, even though the 90s boom was mostly the result of the tech revolution, not Bill sprinkling magic neoliberal fairy dust on the GDP. My favorite anecdote I found of Bill during this time was during the NAFTA negotiations, during which Bill became frustrated with negative public polling around the deal, largely due to...
After 3 months of working on it, Bill finally realizes he can't have the deficit and investments in education at the same time.
Jesus Christ.
And he yelled, quote, "We are losing our soul! It's turning into a Wall Street plan!"
It's a Wall Street plan! I feel so betrayed by tying myself to them and telling them in private fundraisers that I would obey them, and now they're running the show.
Who could say this coming?
And if Clinton's economic pivot showed how far he was willing to drift from his early ideals at home, his foreign policy would prove he was just as willing to abandon them abroad. So after Clinton finished reshaping the American economy like it was a lump of neoliberal Play-Doh,
also, I think the Flint water stunt is really what shook me out of it with Obama. Like, I recognized the drone strike stuff, and I was on an easy ground up. Like, well, the president has to compromise on things, right? But I don't know, something about the whole Flint, Michigan incident made me go like, oh no.
And just like with his economic agenda, the foreign policy version of Bill Clinton
guess because it came in right at the end and it had the weird sipping
stunt. The Clinton years were basically a non-stop tour of American intervention. Somalia, Haiti, Bosnia, Kosovo, Iraq, Sudan. Each administration framed it as a reluctant, carefully considered decision. But after a while, the pattern became clear. If there was a crisis somewhere, the US was going to manage it. And manage usually meant bomb. It wasn't really that Bill became a warmonger. More so that he embraced this very 90s post-Cold War paternalistic outlook of America as sort of world police.
Let's go police the world! America! Fuck yeah!
Ironically, perhaps the one time that American military intervention would have saved lives was during the 1994 Rwandan genocide, in which 800,000 Tutsis were slaughtered in a brutal ethnic cleansing. On that occasion, however, the United States chose not to intervene and pressured the UN Security Council to reduce the number of peacekeepers, with the Clinton administration reasoning that Rwanda did not align with US political or economic interests. In that way, the Clinton foreign policy mindset was a bit of an ideological precursor to Trump's America First. We were willing to act, but only when we determined it was in wealthy American self-interest.
But it doesn't serve my interests. How does it serve my interests?
And you can see it very clearly in Clinton's 2000 Camp David summit. There, Clinton walked in
I don't think
determined
it's
to
a
broker
good movie,
historic
but
peace
if
agreement
you
between
have
Israelis and Palestinians.
access to
But
the
many
movie
analysts argue that the
Congo, which
proposals
is
lean heavily toward
sometimes
Israel's
on
positions.
Tubi.
And when the talks collapsed, the narrative
the
that took hold
90s
of Washington
adventure
placed most of the
classic,
blame on
I
the
guess you
Palestinian
could say.
side. To this day,
I feel
Clinton
it has
continues
some
to blame
interesting
Palestinian head of state Yasser
pathos to
Arafat
it
for the
because of the state
breakdown,
of
being
American
quoted in
foreign policy
2004
in the
criticizing
decade.
him for walking away from a good deal.
What
In
up,
the end, Clinton's foreign
3256?
policy record is just another in a long line of reversals. First, he abandoned his anti-racist roots, then he gutted the economic vision of his own party, and finally he tossed his anti-war principles into the shredder. By the time he left office, the guy who once agonized over Vietnam had bombed 6 different countries, failed to act to prevent genocide, and spoiled the best chance for Palestinian liberation in decades. So as far as I see it, the problem with Slick Willie is actually pretty simple. You just can't believe him because he's never really believed in anything himself. He would say or do anything to obtain and retain power. I blame Bill Clinton for everything because he's a bullshitter. And he set the stage for a ludicrous amount of alternative facts and two-faced scheming and empty promises that define American politics today. It's kind of funny. Conan O'Brien actually wrote a piece in Time magazine at the end of the Clinton presidency where he talked about how Clinton was his favorite president. And his reason why was that he was entertaining.
Yeah, 3256
He was a
been
cartoon.
with us for a
At the end
moment.
of the piece, Conan laments that the show was over. I love Conan, but he was wrong there. The show wasn't over. We've been living in the show that Slick Willie started ever since.
See,
and
also
I don't know
Bill
about
Clinton
y'all, but I'm
eased us
ready to
into
turn
the
the
idea
show
of a
off.
celebrity
I'm gonna go back
president.
to politicians that we can trust. People who,
I
even
do
if you disagree
think
with
there
them,
is a
even worse, if
continuity
you find them a
there
tad
in
bit
when
boring,
we slide
you can
to
at least
like
acknowledge that they're
Obama
being
and then
honest.
Trump being the
Because
kind of
at the
end
end
of
of
the
the day,
fad.
we all want to be someone who believes.
Slick Willie and me swimming in the Epstein pool. Yeah, Bill stares at the beautiful women. He says she's looking at you. I don't think so. I'm worried they're underage. I think we should leave now. Bill says he wish he was someone just a little more funky when everybody loves you. Well, Bill, you're just about as funky as you can be. Slick Willie and me staring at the big screen. We look up at
Yeah,
the
gnarly. Also,
television.
during
What
the actual
do we
Obama
see?
administration,
Hillary
the
staring
coverage
right back
of
at
like
me.
foreign
She
affairs
says we
was
want
always
big
just a bit
stars,
too
but
like
we don't know why. We don't know how. But
pining
when
to be
everybody
Tom Clancy. I think of the movie like
then
Lions
we'll
for
be
Lambs
just
or
about
The
as
Fifth
happy as we
Estate. Just
Bill
the sort of the
and
hollow
me
prestige sort of
gonna
approach
be
to journalism that I think at some point I guess it was expected to be the thing that was going to stop Trump early on, and it just wasn't, as far as like appearances protocol and caring about like the character of American presentation goes. To me, it really does start with Kennedy, and it's mostly because of the invention of TV and the technological context in which the president became an easy-to-digest sort of face for the American body.
When they were cooking this shit up.
You're going to turn around.
All right,
until
this is
70.
Alexander Avina's newest on Charlie Kirk. I'm going to let this one play as well. This one's a bit of a long one. This might take up the rest of our session, but I think this plays into or transitions us from the end of kind of the Clinton era into like, I watched a bit of this one. It starts talking about where, you know, Charlie Kirk started in kind of the early Republican era he was coming out of and transitioning into. I do want to just pause really quick and do bring up that, as mentioned in the video, the Clintons had slaves when they were in the governor's mansion in Arkansas. Like, if you haven't seen the documentary 13th, I'm pretty sure it's a Netflix original, so it's not one that goes on and off the service, so it will be up there. But, I mean, slavery is still accepted within the U.S. Constitution as a means of punishing criminals. And if you start getting very slippery and rubber bandy with what you classify as criminal behavior, which, you know, is something you see all throughout Butler's works when it comes to the homeless and the vagrants and those who are out of work and looking for work, you just reinstate slavery. You just reinstate slavery. I actually think this is one of the great things about the movie 12 Years a Slave that was overlooked because, like, the movie was lauded, but I think it was lauded in sort of a distant, like, oh yes, a movie about slavery, pat on the back, Oscar Academy way. I think what makes that movie really good and better than, you know, something as, like, weirdly racist as Green Book, which, you know, we can get into, like, the whole model minority, perfect performance, like, it's really about the white people, etc., etc. But Something about 12 Years a Slave I really like is how much it focuses on the labor and the technological context of the time, and how much there were these rationalizations, both, you know, practical and spiritual, as to why this institution needed to be there, and that it wasn't just like people are racist so they did this to all the black people. It's like, well, there's a whole social macro structure set up to reinforce and rationalize this and keep it going despite the inhuman things it makes people do. I had a few friends I remember who, upon seeing that movie, were like, oh yeah, I've had those kind of days working at Walmart. And that in some ways, you know, not to cheapen the experience of those who did experience slavery, because that shit did suck and really did happen, but it does speak to how shitty labor subjects are treated in America. Anyways, let's start this Alexander Avina essay. Although, really quick, let me check with the chat. Ooh, Jari, I actually don't know that. That's a fun piece of trivia, though, the tracking with government shutdowns, because I was thinking about that the other day, how at least since 2012, I can remember in some way posting as like an active Facebook participant, you know, a youthful 20-something social mediaite, there being a pretty regularly increasing interval of shutdowns occurring. 1980 FTC under Carter, okay. Yeah, mask for mask, and I feel growing up in a bilingual culture, that kind of thing, I don't know, I've had stories about how permeable the border was in the past, so there's always been a sense of, like, I don't know, occupation? Reagan's era really did accelerate. Yeah, that's the whole thing. Like, he came in and did the austerity gut, and then you have Bush and Clinton who kind of like go like, no, everything's under control, we're suturing it back up, we'll just have the private industry take care of this now. I mean, that's neoliberalism in a nutshell. The way I try to keep it short in explanations, because it's a word that gets so overused on the internet, is, you know, it's liberalism, except instead for like the individual, like classical liberalism, like, you know, liberate the individual to practice the best they can so that they can compete in a market to the best they can. It's for corporations. Like, the corporation is the subject object individuated like priority of the state. Like, their profiting and their flourishing is what's needed. So it's like, it's up to trusting and liberating the corporation to behave as it wants to be, and, you know, the free market will solve it from there. Like, you know, if Starbucks just donates X amount of its profits, if you know, if the market is just, and, you know, of course there's no such thing as union busting or like law enforcement intimidation or any kind of political skewering, anything. Nah, like if everything's just, the invisible hand will take care of it, is the ethos. Man, all right, I'm just gonna start this essay.
This video is sponsored by
I'm gonna make these deliveries. We're gonna rebuild these roads.
I am deeply disturbed by the shooting
were
in Utah.
privatized and
Doug and I
deconstructed
send our
some time
prayers
ago.
to Charlie Kirk and his family. Let me be clear. Political violence has no place in America. I condemn this act, and we all must work together to ensure this does not lead to more violence. Political violence has no place in this country. Political violence of any kind and against any individual is unacceptable and completely incompatible with American values. But this kind of despicable violence has no place in our democracy. The attack on Charlie Kirk is disgusting, vile, and reprehensible. In the United States of America, we must reject political violence in every form. There is no place in our country for this kind of violence. It must end now.
Yeah, the corporation is the person, as famously stated, my friends.
On September 10th, 2025, conservative commentator Charlie Kirk was fatally shot while speaking at an event at Utah Valley University. That makes the assassination of Charlie Kirk the 621st recorded school shooting in the United States since 2000. This is how long you have to scroll down on the Wikipedia page for a list of school shootings in the United States before you reach Charlie's death. It wasn't even the most casualties reported from a school shooting that day. In America, we like to render death invisible. We keep it far away, we assign it a number, a category.
Very
we
effective
deny its
scroll,
reality
yes.
by deferring to concepts like war, evil, tragedy. Death is simply an abstraction until death becomes the dead. Until the living use the dead to make death knowable. Why do we know the name Charlie Kirk and not number 621? What else can one say about Charlie Kirk that hasn't been said in every prayer, criticism, condemnation, celebration, eulogy, think piece, tweet, podcast, presidential address, or group chat? For all there is to say about Kirk's life, and we'll get there, few would celebrate anything about Kirk's death. This was a tragedy, not because I want to mourn Charlie's political legacy, but because even as Kirk's political life threatened the lives of marginalized people, his murder threatens the possibility of politics itself. A functioning democracy doesn't really survive the normalization of political violence, nor does a YouTube channel. So let me do the thing. This video is not an endorsement of political violence. I do not argue or believe that Charlie Kirk deserved to die, or that political assassinations are good, or that we must now use violence against political enemies. No. We shouldn't live in a country where political violence is the norm. Democracies work well because they channel conflict into non-violent forms of resistance. Protest, elections, deliberation,
wow, what a metaphor,
groups,
gnarly,
parties,
very
lobbying.
vivid.
Active political violence destroys democracies and hurts vulnerable groups the most. However, there's a difference between political violence as an action and political violence, the idea.
Take my
in
truck
any
and
regime,
expand the roads
democratic
before taking
or
on more
otherwise,
quests.
the idea of political violence performs a crucial political function. And don't take it from me.
When you're founding a new regime, it is not possible to found a new regime without some
Yeah, he'll
form
just be like Bill Clinton.
of political
I mean, not Bill Clinton,
violence.
Bill
America
Gates.
only exists because of political violence. The American Revolution was the necessary precondition for the establishment of the American Constitutional Republic. We are one of many countries founded from a moment of violent uprising. We hope that violence is never necessary again. Yet, we're always haunted by the specter of its eternal possibility. That's part of why, in the United States, not all forms of speech are protected speech. You can't stand in the park and tell everyone to bomb Chipotle for that miserable portion of guac. Sometimes words about violence lead to real violence, but it's not always clear what that means. Would Quentin Tarantino have been held responsible if there was a mass genocide of Bills following the release of Kill Bill? Or sometimes it's possible to say things that don't directly call for violence, but that say
all I'm doing is
paint
enacting
certain groups
imperialism
as
in Australia for the sake of a
incompatible with a
privatized
functioning
version of
society.
the US
Even
government.
if words themselves aren't violence, even if they aren't inciting violence, words can absolutely create the conditions.
I do actually have a
for
lot of
violence.
thoughts on that
After
I
the
hope
Charlie
to
Kirk
air by
shooting,
the resolution
Republicans
of the
accused
story,
Democrats
because
of
if it
doing
doesn't
just that.
cash in
That
on
the
that, I'm
left
going to be
needs
very
to
upset.
tone down the rhetoric and needs to cut this crap out. Somebody's going to get hurt by it. But we cannot tell the American people that one candidate is a fascist.
Maybe someone should have told Charlie.
You're the fascist, Joe Biden.
Now, I could spend hours compiling all of the horrific or hypocritical things that a person or group said in the hopes that it might actually change someone's mind. And frankly, it's not hard to find Charlie Kirk saying something reprehensible.
Of course you should be able to use whips against foreigners that are coming into your country. Why is that controversial?
Wow, awful. Like, sure, we should hold people accountable for the consequences of their rhetoric, but it doesn't really help us understand why he said what he said. Or more importantly, why apparently millions of Americans seem to agree with what he said. When Barry Weiss asked Charlie Kirk's widow, Erica Kirk, about her late husband's controversial statements, Mrs. Kirk responded with something kind of true.
My husband is not to be deteriorated to 2 sentences. He's not. He is a thought leader, and he was brilliant of a man. So that's fine if you want to take words out of his mouth or out of context without the whole thing. But that's the problem.
People aren't just collections of quotes. Politics is more than just language. So what if we were to make a genuine effort to understand Charlie as a person? If Charlie is a thought leader, then why don't we take the time to examine what he actually thought? I've spent the last several months putting together, to the best of my ability, a comprehensive picture of who Charlie Kirk was, or at least what his public political life truly stood for. And while I think it's obvious that Kirk's political work perpetuated prejudice, racism, misogyny, Islamophobia, and of course, hate, I believe that this is an incomplete assessment. Hate is a fickle and fleeting emotion, not a political orientation. Political movements are too complex to run on hate.
Yeah,
alone.
there's something
In
more
contemporary
articulate
American
there.
politics, hate is just one part of the engine of an inconceivably rotten machine underlying the right wing's grander project. Contemporary American conservatism is a well-funded and well-organized extremist movement that is, without exaggeration, actively trying to destroy American society as we know it to install an authoritarian Christian oligarchy. Charlie was not just a witness to this, he was an architect. If we trace Charlie Kirk's political journey from Tea Party libertarian to authoritarian Christian nationalist, we find a perfect case study of how, and more importantly, why American conservatism has changed so much in the past 20 years. When liberal political commentators join the bandwagon in saying that Kirk did politics right, or when Democratic leaders admire his passion and commitment for debate, they're falling for the bait. Kirk wasn't some right-of-center classical liberal who believed in a robust deliberative democracy. His public debates and online persona were the tip of a carefully crafted iceberg. Charlie Kirk will go down in history as one of the chief architects of American fascism.
I hear they're going to let you do that for your rent soon.
This video is a comprehensive commentary that covers American conservatism's recent
Which I could have
political
swore less than a year ago
with
I saw
Charlie
some
Kirk's life
headlines
as
and
our
articles on
representative
studies
case.
about how many
We'll
people
try
are
to
paying rent
outline
with
a framework
credit
for
cards. And
American
if that was
politics
a year
going
ago,
forward. This
jeez.
video is also a tragic narrative. There's heroes and villains, victories and tragedies, and well, the ending, that's up to you. It all starts with a question. On July 8th, 2025, J.D. Vance, emo prince of millennial fascism, delivered a speech on what he thought to be the most important issue of our time.
So I believe one of the most pressing problems for us to face as statesmen is to redefine the meaning of American citizenship in the 21st century.
Notice how he didn't say clarify or restore or uphold. He said redefine. Vance and his conservative party admit that they aren't here to conserve. They're here to offer us a new answer. What is an American? For years, both conservatives and liberals believed that the answer was self-evident. America's an idea, Jack. America isn't an ethnicity, race, or religion. Everyone agreed that Americans were a people linked only by a shared belief in the Constitution. From Democrats,
America's an idea.
The United States of America is the greatest idea.
to Republicans.
America's the only nation founded on an idea.
Anyone from any corner of the earth can come to live in America.
Break a leg, mask for mask.
An American.
Yup. Even the ontologically evil Ronald Reagan understood
Yeah,
this.
Jari.
We draw our people, our strength, from every country and every corner of the
Also,
world.
just
But
all
now
the
there's
mediators
a new
of, like,
generation
for
of
people who don't have, like,
conservatives
bank
with
accounts
a
or checking
different
accounts
definition
that
of
taps
America.
into Jari as
These
far as, like,
individuals
not
travel
even
under
just, like,
different names. National
not
conservatives,
like, you know,
American
garnish wages in the sense that the feds are
Christian
taking out for taxes,
nationalists,
but
and
just,
they're
like,
probably radicalizing your local white boy.
the
They
lack of
argue that
access to even being
America
able to
isn't
save
an
your money.
idea.
I always thought that the whole
America
idea of
is
turning
a
the post
people,
office into a national bank, or,
particular
you know, being able to
group
do
of
banking
people
or having a
with
bank
a
account with the
shared
post office.
heritage.
But America is not
I
just
think that's
an
a good idea.
America
I haven't ever
is
heard
a
any
nation.
bad takes on
It is
that.
a group of people with a common history and a common future. And yes, thank you.
Huh. Wait, which group? What heritage?
It's our heritage, our destiny. We Americans are the sons and daughters of the Christian pilgrims that poured out from Europe's
Sorry to
shores
hear 3-2.
baptize a new world in their ancient faith.
Oh, okay, sure. This isn't gonna end well. Should we be concerned that these people run the government now? Well,
Yeah, you got any good leads
a good
on
chunk of these
places?
national conservatives didn't start believing these ideas
Friends with
until
spaces?
recently. One of those people was Charlie Kirk. This was Charlie Kirk in 2019.
America's just a placeholder for timeless ideas. And if you fall too in love with, the specific place and all this, That's not what it is.
And this is what he said less than a month before he died.
America was at its peak when we halted immigration for 40 years and we dropped our foreign-born percentage to its lowest level ever. We have 55 million foreigners in this country. We got to take a step back and say, guys, that you're no longer a nation. You're something else. You're a colony.
Hey, did anyone notice that 55 million number includes any foreign-born person in the United States, whether they be citizens, legal residents, or undocumented? And do you think it ends there? Do you think it ends with targeting immigrants? Today, the target is foreign-born individuals, but maybe tomorrow it's anyone with foreign-born parents. Maybe it won't have anything to do with national origins. Maybe the target will be a certain racial group, sexualities, Democratic voters. How did we get here and where are we going? If we can understand how someone like Charlie Kirk went from believing in America the idea to America the people, then we'll be able to understand kind of everything. So let's talk about Charlie Kirk.
If you're seeing this, I'm probably dead.
Yeah, we've never left the company store behind.
Charlie was raised in an upper-middle-class Republican household in the suburbs of 1990 Chicago. As a Republican kid surrounded by a Democratic voting community, Charlie was destined to be an outcast.
I mean, even if you become, like, say, successful as a content creator, like, you don't own the content platforms.
In 6th grade about climate change. As Charlie tells it, he was the only one willing to stand up to liberal indoctrination.
You know, high school teachers and college professors are incredibly tolerant of other people's views as long as you share their own.
The journalist Kyle Spencer tracked down Charlie's classmates and asked them to recall what Charlie was actually like.
As they remember it,
Charlie
was often told to pipe down. Not so much because of his views.
There's one I saw recently where it was just the shot from the end of Evangelion where the next burst
Despite his later assertions that liberals are dead set on their ideas and intolerant of dissent,
including or not
said
including
that
gang
Charlie had a
violence was the
superiority
caption.
complex and did not tolerate disagreement.
When Charlie graduated from high school, he didn't immediately start a career in political activism. He wanted to take over the world. In fact, his classmates literally named him most likely to take over the world. No, Charlie wanted greatness. Charlie dreamed of attending West Point Military Academy. Getting into West Point is hard. Charlie did everything he could to become perfect. And even after leading the high school's sports teams, rising the ranks of Boy Scouts and testing well, West Point told him that it wasn't enough. They rejected him. And what did Charlie have to say about that?
Unfortunately, I was waitlisted and I eventually lost my spot out to what I felt was a far less qualified applicant in my district that was of a different gender and a different persuasion. You could take it any way you want, but I knew the test scores, I knew the qualifications. I was kind of got the short end of the stick.
Oh, so it was actually affirmative action's fault. Damn you, woke point. Or maybe it wasn't. Classmates recall that Charlie once told his chemistry teacher that he didn't believe in homework. Now, tell me, does it make sense that such a committed anti-homework rebel should feel entitled to a spot at the most selective military academy in the country? Yet, this is the mythology that Kirk fashioned for himself in his early years. An origin story as a misunderstood libertarian debate prodigy, marginalized for his own genius.
I love the frog
Constantly
truck.
getting in debates, or as I like to call enlightened conversations with my teachers. And I spent a lot of time out in the hall in high school, especially in economics class, because that's what the left does. They're the most intolerant group of people that you've ever met their entire life.
But the truth is, frankly, a little sad.
I was a minority in my high school, which was really interesting, growing up in kind of that kind of environment.
Here we have a tragic political pathology, an insecure teen isolated from the majority of his peers for being rude and confrontational. It was probably really easy to bully the weird Republican kid who doesn't know how to act around people of color. I mean, wouldn't you?
And I learned so much about different cultures, and honestly, that's really where I got my kind of focus on politics, because I was always naturally conservative, loved America, loved the values that
naturally
our country stood for,
conservative,
and I never understood why you'd want to deviate from that. And then I found myself trying to convince these ideas.
Americans
to
believe
people that
in
had
blood
never heard or
magic
never
too
met
much,
a
and I feel there's
Republican
too much of this
life.
idea of like
And,
politics is like
I mean,
fixed identity
I
stuff,
knew
when it
people
should
that were
be
in
like
this country illegally. I went to high school with them.
Politics
Right?
should be,
So,
you know,
for
the
me, it was a really
boring
personal
stuff of
connection.
figuring out and
People
acting
like
on
Charlie
and
Kirk
working
often
through like
think they're
policy for the
entitled to
ongoing
status and
project of
recognition.
like a
And
stable
when the
social
reality hits them
environment.
that not everyone is going to cater to that entitlement,
But it
that
has
his
to mean this
underpaid
like
teachers and
Jungian
annoyed
hero
classmates
narrative shit
didn't want
to
argue
Americans
about
because the way
libertarianism
the
during class
Constitution
time,
is set up and framed
Charlie
in the
grew
Declaration of
bitter and
Independence,
resentful.
it's like
But since
this
in the real
existential
world,
like
Charlie was
yawn
a
of
part
like
of the majority in a
I,
way
the
his
self.
minority classmates never would be.
I'm reading
Charlie
whole
knew
and
he could
new,
find
something
that status
original and
recognition
unprecedented,
elsewhere.
and there's
He
no,
channeled his resentment
everybody in
into
America
politics,
has the
in a
same
way that
blank
would
slate
define his
potential
career
to just
forever.
like render a
Freshly
whole
rejected
new
from West
universe
Point,
from their
Kirk decides
invention
to
and
take a
be a
gap year
billionaire
to get
and you'll
involved
have
in local
farms
politics.
and
Libertarianism
children
with
and
its
slaves
low tax,
and
free
all
market
the money
and small
and
government
everything.
stance
And here's your big
called to
truck.
the young
That's going to be
Charlie for some reason.
$2,000
Does
a
it
month.
make sense that a 17-year-old with no assets, business, or income wants to cut taxes and regulation? In spite of this, the young Charlie joined his local tea party. A tea party? Aw, Charlie, is that like a fun little afternoon with your little boyfriend? No, it's more like a nightmarish afternoon with a bunch of divorced uncles. The Tea Party was a fiscally conservative movement funded by oil billionaires masquerading as a popular patriotic uprising. Tea Partiers wanted lower taxes, less government spending, and little to no treading on me. Charlie started as a Tea Party guy through and through. As a teen,
cool. I
he
actually
spoke at
wanted to
local
encounter
gatherings,
a BT.
networked with supporters in the Chicago business community, hoping to get something off the ground.
So here I am on June 5th of 2012, lacking the two things that you really need to succeed in politics: money and connections.
In May of 2012, while delivering a speech at Benedictine University, Charlie found a way in. His speech caught the eye of Bill Montgomery, a retired businessman with a passion for mentoring local conservative youth. Billiam gave Charles a piece of advice.
A really amazing mentor by the name of Bill Montgomery, may he rest in peace. He said, Charlie, you shouldn't go to college.
Montgomery encouraged Kirk to put his talents to use by starting something of his own. Perhaps a conservative organization that would reach Charlie's generation better than the grand old Hoopers ever could. Montgomery had the business and marketing experience. Charlie had the young face and energy. They called their project Turning Point USA. Kirk's disciples like to claim that TPUSA started with Charlie pulling up to college campuses and debating his way into stardom.
He started with nothing more than an idea and a folding table.
12 years ago, Charlie walked onto his first college campus. He set up a card table and put up a sign with 3 words: "Big government sucks."
But no, he didn't. He started with the help of a millionaire who had powerful friends. That's not to say that Charlie didn't work hard, but a lot of people work hard. Not everyone has a millionaire mentor. Over the next few months, Charlie and Bill hit the road, traveling to Tea Party gatherings across the Midwest, networking, building connections, and importantly, trying to fund someone to fully finance their message. Soon enough, they found themselves entangled in the Republican Party political machine. Do you ever get the feeling that the Republican Party might just be evil? Oh, I'm sorry, am I being divisive?
I hate my opponent, and I don't want the best for them. I'm sorry.
We have to understand that there's a difference between the diverse group of voters who, for whatever reason, vote Republican, and the Republican establishment, the machine. Study its history, and you'll find that modern American conservatism, yes, including Charlie Kirk's conservatism, is largely the product of a small, insular group of elitists. To understand Charlie Kirk, we have to understand how that happened. This is Fred C. Koch. He started his career as a chemical engineer for the American oil industry in the 1920s and 30s. After accumulating fabulous wealth, in 1940 he founded an oil firm that would soon be known as Koch Industries. How did Fred do it? Well, sometimes you're just at the right place at the right time. And because of that, sometimes you find yourself in business with the Third Reich and Stalinist Russia. But Fred wasn't a bad guy. In fact, Fred wasn't really a fan of Stalinism, that is. He thought the Nazis were actually pretty chill and praised their work ethic. But communism, well, Fred, a patriotic believer in the American free market, saw communism as the biggest threat to the American way of life. Again, the Nazis were fine though. In 1958, he co-founded the John Birch Society, an anti-communism, anti-big government, and anti-civil rights activist group, because of course he was racist. When Fred passed away in 1967, his sons, Charles and David, inherited not only his vast fortune, but their father's political spirit. But Charlie and Dave weren't satisfied with just quietly funding candidates. They wanted to change American society itself. Soon enough, they would get their wish. But it wasn't going to be easy. What we call fiscal conservatism today, like cutting government spending, cutting welfare, low taxes, for the most part, these ideas have never really been broadly popular in the United States, at least up until recently. While it is true that Americans hate paying taxes, Americans also like the social services that they benefit from. For example, the two largest government programs, Medicare and Social Security, have enjoyed consistent public support since their inception. Bitches love post-war liberal welfare states. Even though Americans generally like government programs, they don't always like the government. In 1964, when Americans were asked if they trusted the federal government to do what is right at least most of the time, 77% said yes. But in the next decade or so, that trust fell dramatically. With the failure of Vietnam, civil unrest in the 60s, and finally the Watergate scandal in the early 70s, public trust in government fell to its lowest point, 36%, and it has never truly recovered. With American trust in government so low in the 1970s, libertarians and fiscal conservatives saw an opportunity, which brings us back to the Koch brothers. Throughout the 1970s, the brothers poured billions of dollars into funding, if not founding, institutions that promoted anti-government libertarianism. And the Koch brothers weren't the only ones doing this. Ultra-wealthy conservatives like Richard Scaife, John Olin, the Bradley brothers, most of whom made their fortune in the oil industry, spent billions to transform libertarianism from a fringe idea into an institutionally backed political project. Think tanks, university research centers, conferences, packaged with obscure names like the Cato Institute, the Institute for Humane Studies, the Manhattan Institute, all to hide the fact that they were fronts for the political agenda of a few billionaires. Since most of these were established as nonprofits, they were under no legal obligation to disclose their donors. Money could flow from anywhere, from anyone. This is what's known as dark money.
In the 80s and 90s, these free market, limited government ideas found their way into policy agendas, a trend today known as neoliberalism. Neoliberalism infected all of American politics, but its most extreme and dangerous form found a home in the Republican Party. By the late 2000s and 2010s, right around the time when young Charlie Kirk became politically active, dark money was bigger than ever before, and most of it was going to conservatives. Two important things happened around this time. Possibly three. Life was slower back then. First, in September of 2008, the American financial market collapsed, leaving millions of Americans economically destitute and increasingly skeptical of corporate influence. The second important thing happened a month later, when Americans elected Barack Obama, the Democratic presidential candidate who promised to rein in Wall Street excesses and restore faith in the government. According to my sources, that did not happen.
People were angry. Dark money seized the moment. The Koch-backed Americans for Prosperity hosted rallies trashing Obama-era stimulus, building email lists, training organizers, and quietly workshopping a way to rebrand people's populist anger into something more billionaire-friendly. They called it the Tea Party. The AFP worked behind the scenes to turn the Tea Party into a real movement. They offered talking points,
man, there is a
type,
history of just
merch.
like a record of being wrong you can find within the think tank industrial complex.
Really believed in the cause. But the AFP's friends in right-wing media made the movement look like a completely spontaneous uprising of fed-up taxpayers, when it was anything but. Among that crowd of patriots, somewhere in the Midwest around 2012, stood a young Charlie Kirk, networking with fellow Tea Partiers to help build Turning Point USA. Charlie was a true believer, yet he knew that politics was about more than belief.
Wow, Jari, I remember kind of entertaining it when Ron Paul was a thing, but I don't think I ever went to like any kind of meeting.
Bill introduced Charlie to Mike Miller.
I wasn't even like a student journalist at the time, and I do remember going to like...
This was Charlie's way.
I didn't even go to like a straight up libertarian meeting, but like there was like a group of libertarians at
invitations, which led to
a public event that were really zealous about getting the word in
Charlie
and
was being flown across the country.
I mean, for the sake of the story, I was willing to listen to them and include them in the article because they were there. But
a few handshakes later, and Charlie had hustled his way onto
very
Fox News,
scary,
presenting himself as the face
vibe.
of a new growing generation of libertarian
in the
youth.
sense that,
Or at
like,
least
despite the
that's the
platform
story
being
Charlie
a very
needed to sell.
pro-freedom
As he wrote
platform, it
in
also
his first
seeks like approval
autobiography,
from
"We are
authority.
going
As
to
in, like,
show
look,
what can
everyone,
happen
aren't what I
when the
do isn't
principles
what I'm
of
doing like the
individual
right thing
liberty
to
and
do.
free markets are messaged properly to the right audiences, and then delivered through comprehensive machinery
You kind of
and
see how
infrastructure
there's still
that
an
takes those
underlying
principles
authoritarian
and splices them into every American's intellectual
fascist
and spiritual
potential
DNA.
impulse there
so
because of
many
like
of the
the sense of
conservative
strong
organizations
surrender.
TPUSA soon found itself in a network of right-wing dark money. Don't get me wrong, Charlie was talented. He knew
Yeah,
how to
oh man,
talk.
I even
He knew
think
what words
even
would scare
nowadays,
old
like it's
rich white
become more of a
people
like
into opening
I
their
say this
pocketbooks,
because I'm too
which,
ashamed to say
frankly,
Republican.
is one of the most lucrative skills one could have.
Which again speaks to that
But what
impulse I'm
exactly
talking
did
about,
he
where
say
like
to
it's a
To the
label
many
made sort
paranoid
of for
Christian
approval.
billionaires he schmoozed, Charlie spun tales of predatory political conspiracy. He told them that universities were cesspools of Marxist communism, liberal professors are indoctrinating your children, gayifying your grandchildren, silencing any opposition, convincing them that civil rights are good, and leading America down a path toward a limp-wristed, multicultural, globalist New World Order. Luckily, there's a way to save your grandchildren's souls. There's an organization of young visionaries called Turning Point USA, and they're willing to fight in the trenches, spread the free market gospel, and change college culture from the inside. But here's the thing. Charlie only attended college part-time for less than 1 semester. Frankly, it doesn't seem like enough time to draw a conclusive narrative about what life in American universities are actually like. He literally did not even give it the good old college try. Yet he positioned himself as an expert on higher education. He dubbed college a scam.
When you're in high school, your counselors and your teachers are telling you have to go to college to be successful. You have to get a 4-year degree. And unfortunately, that's not the reality.
I mean, yeah, sure, you don't technically need a college education to be successful, especially if you're a rich kid like Charlie who fell into the lap of elite conservative sugar daddies fresh out of high school. But for the overwhelming majority of low and middle income people, college education, even in a useless degree like sociology, is one of the most effective methods of achieving class mobility by far. There's a lot to criticize about universities as institutions that perpetuate liberal elitism and maintain class divides, whatever. But the solution to that is to expand access to college education, not destroy it. There's a reason why the same conservatives who say college is a scam
Yeah, I get
also
the
went to
sell
some
with
of
it
the
too,
most
Jerry.
elite
Like, I feel
private
that's probably
universities
why
in
it
the
was
country.
also like, oh
Conservative
yeah.
elites resent the fact that universities offer them
Maybe there is
middle-class
something to
an
being
opportunity to
interventionist, and then you
challenge
realize
their
it's not the
elite status.
1800s.
That's why Donald Trump,
And then you
graduate
do
of an
more
Ivy League
studying and
university who
realize
sent
even in
all
the
of his children
1700s it wouldn't
to
work
expensive
because of the
private
way
universities, says shit like
commerce
this.
works.
We won with poorly educated. I love the poorly educated.
Love the poorly
Republicans know
educated.
that college exposes potential voters to new ideas, people, and research that challenges traditional conservative values.
I
Climate
remember finding it
research,
kind of
social
weird how
research,
obsessed
medical
libertarians at the
research,
time,
being around a diverse
2011,
community of
2012
people,
were with like
all of
the
that
gold
tends
standard.
to shatter the Republican narrative.
Once I was
That's
able
why
to
they
like
need
wrap my
young
head
people
around
like
why we
Charlie
abolished the
to
gold
lie on their
standard, I
behalf.
was like, oh
Charlie
no, that
wasn't
actually
very
makes
good at
sense.
it at first. In 2012 and 2013, Turning Point USA struggled to gain momentum, probably because their message stunk. Let me demonstrate.
It's 2012. You're about to graduate college, the financial crisis is fresh in your memory, boomers have destroyed the economy, and the job market is a steaming pile of garbage. All you've got is about 100 credits in your sociology degree, and, well, your immediate employment prospects aren't looking great. But whatever. You're home for the holidays, and you just want to forget all of it. You're hanging out in the living room with your grandpa, and since he's a boomer, Fox News is in the background. You mostly ignore it until suddenly you hear this.
New study says college students are more entitled. They feel themselves more entitled than ever.
Did this guy just fly in from Stupid Town? How am I entitled after working my ass off for the past 4 years, working part-time to pay for school, getting ghosted from hundreds of job applications?
Charlie Kirk is from Turning Point USA.
Oh, well, maybe this young guy gets it.
And the problem is they think so highly of themselves, and in return, they want something as far as, I want a free education because I'm good in school. Or I want a free job that is even more higher paying than my parents.
Now that's entitlement.
Of course.
A free job?
Those damn entitled millennials.
It's
wow.
a job. They're
How
supposed to
dare
pay you.
And we're teaching young people that the society of free markets and capitalism
is going to bring more opportunity for you rather than a government handout.
Old boomer donors ate this shit up. But TPUSA was supposed to be for young people. Instead, they were talking down to young people. Even the kids in TPUSA's first ads seemed to have the enthusiasm of a turnip.
Our generation is in trouble.
It's time for action. Time to take a stand.
Politicians have bankrupted us.
Both fiscally and morally.
If we don't stand for what we believe in,
we will lose our basic freedoms and liberties.
Wow.
I didn't realize, I guess I need to look more into Nick Shirley. I didn't realize he was as big as he was. And every interaction I see with Nick Shirley makes me feel conflicted.
The man with a younger face.
I don't want to say anything mean about Nick Shirley, but a lot of people seem very worried about him whenever he comes up in conversation, is how I'll put it.
Do I really need to know about baseline budgeting? White guy, bow tie, white guy. No one wants to be talked down.
Is he being taken advantage of is kind of how I want to phrase
by
it.
his liberal teachers. Why didn't he capitalize
Because
on
I
that
don't
fate?
believe he
To be
is
fair, Charlie kind of had his
cognizant enough to
In a
do his own
pre-Trump
work.
world, elite conservatives found anti-establishment
The
sentiment
kind of approaches
too
his
messy.
videos take
I mean,
to things.
if the voters find out who they're actually supposed to be angry at. But that was soon to change. As Charlie Kirk mingled with conservative socialites, he befriended lactic power couple Lee and Allie Hanley. How to describe the Hanleys? The Hanleys were ultra-politically connected, ultra-rich petroleum tycoons who, like many of their peers, funneled their fortunes into libertarian think tanks and Christian advocacy. They weren't just rich in the sense of having a ton of money. You could win $1 billion in the lottery and still never get what the Hanleys had. Status, legacy, blood, heritage, connections, tradition. They were capital R rich, white, East Coast country club, Ivy League, white, Judeo-Christian loving, skin sagging, oil spilling, dark money, white, old school Republicans. They built their reputations behind the scenes, nurturing young political talent, including the ontologically evil Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, 3256. It very much seems like something like that is the situation. Like, I believe she's the one driving him around in the Minnesota video.
Charlie. Whatever he said to them, it must have been either charming or scary enough to work, because soon he was their newest pet project.
Yeah, I'll
Suddenly,
pure water.
Kirk had access to a whole new world of connections.
Extremely
Everything
pure
was
water.
coming together. There was just one thing. Americans were getting tired of the Republican agenda. You see, back in 2014,
the Hanleys commissioned the prolific political pollster Pat Goodell.
They wanted to understand this new post-economic crisis cultural climate, so they gathered the data. Their research revealed that a new anti-establishment political wave was about to take over politics. In Goodell's words, the level of discontent in this country was beyond anything imaginable. The Hanleys shared their findings with a small group of insiders, including a 20-year-old Charlie Kirk. By all indications, it seemed that America was ripe for a new message, a fresh, young vision, a turning point, if you will.
He said the thing.
Charlie Kirk didn't start TPUSA out of a concern for the plight of young people. He, like many other Americans in the 2010s, wanted revenge.
Gang, it's raining out, but I think I can make it over this river and back to the road.
The bank for closing his house, or the insurance companies for denying him life-saving treatment. He wanted revenge against the liberals in his life who made him feel small.
Is any time I'd use these things called facts, and I'd always remind her that facts don't have feelings, I would always be kicked out into the hallway.
Charlie knew how energizing conflict could be, and he had an idea of how the right could use that themselves.
All across America.
It was
on
Charlie
campuses
Kirk,
and in
just like
offices,
the equivalent of like a
political
Disney
correctness
child
freedom-loving
actor.
citizens to take off their clothes, act like a chicken, and jump out
Not
of a
in
12-story
like degree
window.
of success,
I
but
have
just
no intention
moral
of
of
surrendering
being
our
groomed for the
language to
machine
Team
into
Left,
that way.
and I have every intention of doing what is necessary to recapture what has been lost.
While the idea of conflict made some of his elite donors
You know, something I like pointed out in the prior
soon
Clinton
enough,
video is
they
that Clinton
too
was a
realized
striver,
that it was
and you know,
time
this
for a
whole
change.
striver
The
protagonism
Republican Party wasn't
mentality
getting
is
any
something I
younger,
think I try to
as Charlie
articulate.
While some of our donors
As
were
a,
nervous at first, they came to realize that we knew how to connect with
Part of the
people our own
operative
demographic.
ideology of
Eventually,
most
they let
video
Charlie
games
loose.
being, you know,
Hey,
products of the
young people then
neoliberal
wrapped up the vote with Charlie
culture.
Kirk's hoping these three words do it. Big government
sucks.
If the Republicans want to engage young people, they need to do so in a manner that gets their attention in an edgy,
Jari, you're
innovative
so
campaign.
lucky.
TPUSA launched the Big Government Sucks campaign.
He
to
basically
modest
did
success,
a very
simple,
shoddily
eye-catching
made
phrase with a
documentary
small
on
government message.
YouTube
It taught him
that
an important lesson about messaging.
was
One of the
claiming
more effective weapons,
the
if not
Somali
the most
daycares
effective,
in
that the other side
Minnesota
has
were
deployed,
fraudulent,
is its
and
use and control of
there's just a
language
lot
and
of like
speech.
right-wing
Soon enough,
astroturfing of that
Charlie
particular
found
video
himself at
as
the
an excuse to
precipice
send
of a
ICE
new
and the Border
political
Patrol and all
landscape.
that
And 2 years later,
extra hard
well,
into Minnesota.
You know what happened.
And we will make America
I didn't realize he was as
great
big
again.
as he was.
Thank
I
you.
only
Thank you
saw
very much.
really the video after the fact
We
because
often think about politics as something that
it
happens
was being
in certain
boosted by like the
buildings, or
right-wing
as the thing we do
astroturf
every 4
and
years at
I
the
was very
ballot
curious
box.
what's
But
up with
politics
it.
isn't
And
really
watching
about
it,
these
he
procedures
just seems
or
like an
voting
abused
or
child
debate.
whose parents
That's
are
not politics. That's
taking advantage of a
power,
rather
participation,
dopey and
all of which
naive
happens
kid
after
to
politics.
do
Politics itself,
bad news.
the political, in its essence, is a social phenomenon. It is
There's
the
an
process
older
of
man
a collective
he
choosing
has
to
that he only
identify
identifies
as
by first
a
name,
people,
doesn't really
of
cite
articulating
what
what binds
agency
that
or
people,
what
and of that
his
people
credentials are that
transforming
make him
their
more
shared
trusting
will
as a
into
source.
practical action.
And then
But
he just
for
kind of lets this
politics to
old
be
man
ethical,
ramble
it
about
must
his
also
tinfoil
be
theory
universal.
about these daycares.
Authentic social movements appeal to
While
collective universal humanity, not to
Shirley's
particular
mother
identities
drives
or
Shirley, the
interests.
old man,
Political
around to
movements
harass each
translate the
daycare.
diversity of struggles into a shared struggle for a new universal principle. Political
And then
movements
at the end, there's clearly
reorganize
a
systems
hired
by
actor
instituting
who
new
comes
truths.
in to
While
just
Trumpism
like
had
kind of
all the
cry moan
materials for the
about
making
how
of an
much
authentic political movement,
politicians aren't
Trumpism
listening to
didn't
the
appeal
people.
to universal humanity. It didn't want justice.
It's actually
It
a
wanted
very
revenge.
funny final
However,
40
there is
seconds of
something
video because the dude
completely
is
rational
clearly
about
just
the
hamming
anger
it up for a
that
paycheck.
Donald Trump is tapping into.
And
that's what I
Shirley,
think
being
is really
as
wrong
oblivious as he
about
is,
the Donald
doesn't
Trump analysis,
recognize
that
when like a
somehow he's
performance
tapping
is
into
being
this,
too much.
this frothing bath of people that are just irrationally angry
So they
at
just
the
kind of like
system.
let it run.
And the number one
Wow.
critique I have of the pundits, the
Thank you,
talk show
kind
hosts that
stranger.
go after Donald Trump, is
Perfect
the
bridge
people who are
placement.
supporting him are quite frankly very rational about their anger.
Hey, America, why are you so angry? In the early and mid-20th century, Western governments, including the United States, began building robust social welfare programs to develop their middle class and temper their desire for socialism.
I don't want to
things
drive
like
through
helping the
danger,
elderly,
and I also have
home
some
loan assistance, work
materials
programs, the good
I would
stuff.
like
However,
to
in the United States, where racism has been central to
contribute
social
to the
life since the
roads, I
beginning
believe.
of chattel slavery, white people ended up becoming the primary beneficiaries of these new programs,
Yeah, some
which
metal and ceramics to drop
actually
off.
worked out tremendously well for white people, if you haven't noticed. In the 1960s, civil rights movements sought to dismantle these systemic barriers, both the explicit legal kind and the larger structural economic kind. New social programs were created that would, in
I think
theory,
he
help
was
combat the
one
economic
of
barriers
several
disproportionately
contributing
faced by
factors.
people of color. Though imperfect, I'd say that giving poor children healthcare and food was generally a step in the right direction. Then, in the 1970s, the
I
world
do find
economy
it suspicious
pooped itself
again that
for
there's just an
complex geopolitical
a
reasons.
single named
And the particular
like
way in which it pooped
uncredentialed
itself
old
was
man
so
who is the
unprecedented
one
that people
driving the
lost
sort
their
of meat of
minds
the
looking for an
narrative in the video.
explanation.
I want to know who that
Americans
guy is and
needed
where he
something
comes from.
or someone to blame. So Republicans dangled a little carrot in front of the white middle class. Hey, just asking questions, but wasn't it so much better when welfare programs were going to white people? Or, as the ontologically evil Ronald Reagan put it,
In 1964, the famous war on poverty was declared. And a funny thing happened. Poverty,
Appropriate
as
shot of
measured by
Reagan, wow.
dependency, stopped shrinking and then actually began to grow worse. I guess you could say poverty won the war. Poverty won in part because instead of helping the poor, government programs ruptured the bonds holding poor families together.
Except
Ruptured the
that's not
bonds.
true. Poverty was decreasing up until the 1970s. Economic stagnation was a global phenomenon. You can't attribute it to any singular domestic policy. Ronald Wilson Reagan, 3 names, 6 letters each, 666. Are you getting it yet? But no matter. The carrot was dangled. Americans blamed their suffering on what was characterized as the undeserving poor, as the often non-white social parasites destroying American excellence. Social safety nets were cut and inequality shot up. On the surface, proponents of neoliberalism seek to maximize human freedom through free markets. So instead of using the government to organize society and the economy, neoliberals think that the economy should take care of most things. What does that look like in practice? Well, let's check up on the late 20th century. Austerity replaced public investment, unions were kneecapped, economic inequality skyrocketed. Unfettered capitalism isn't just a political or economic ideology, there's an underlying moral project here. Capitalism assumes that conflict is natural and inevitable, which, fair enough. Maybe conflict is just part of human nature, whatever that is. But is all conflict really inevitable? Is it natural and inevitable that there's an enormous wealth disparity between white and black families in the United States? Is it natural and inevitable that 30% of Americans skip medical appointments because they're too expensive? Or could it actually be that some conflicts are the products of exploitative systems and individuals, none of which are natural and inevitable, but in fact artificial and preventable? When capitalism has us by the balls, corporations have to maintain the illusion that everything is fine. They want their workers to get along and to not be racist to each other, at least on company time. So corporate entities have enlisted a class of mostly well-meaning people forced to reconcile social justice with corporate interests. This is the origin of what we call woke, the DEI, the PC, and other offshoots of neoliberal morality. This very calculated, unchallenging notion of social justice that doesn't actually seek to change anything. Charlie Kirk spent much of his career critiquing this thing that we call wokeness. Most of the time, wokeness is just a buzzword conservatives use when they're mad that there's more than one person of color in a movie, but there is some truth to the idea that neoliberal society gives rise to this joyless corporate morality of artificial inclusion.
Where is an intellectual liberal that's able to generate enthusiasm? I mean, they have professors, like, great, okay, you can go listen to nonsense from overly educated elitist academics. They have no cultural ethos at all.
There's a nugget of truth there. A pure free market ideology makes it seem as if economic conflict and its products, like inequality and exploitation, are just natural and inevitable. Meanwhile, public-facing corporate culture tells us that all social conflict must be managed by some faceless bureaucratic entity.
The lie of the West, of modernity, the last 30 years, is that we're gonna have you live and let live and there will be no moral standard. That itself is a moral standard, and it's a really bad one.
We feel powerless to do anything, and we don't have a stake in society or any voice in creating
It is
culture.
extremely tinfoil.
This is the type of frustration that people like Charlie Kirk feed upon,
when
even as his party offers
the Shirley
no
video
solutions.
dropped, Elon Musk did hop
Imagine
at
your
it.
name is Ken. Your town's been hollowed out from offshoring and deindustrialization, the factory closed, the union vanished, stable jobs were replaced by temp work. No one ever really explained why. They just told you to adapt, to be positive. Your company started putting up these posters telling you to say the right words, ignore differences, to see the company as one big happy family. But now your family is cutting your hours. Your health premiums are going up. Your coworkers, your friends, were just replaced by people who don't speak your language. You don't know how to talk to them. It doesn't feel like a family anymore. There's a man on the TV. He doesn't tell you to adapt or to use the right words. He says that actually things were going just fine until the moment they showed up.
How much of like the reactionary nature of this stuff too is just dudes who just don't want to learn
You start to get
things.
angry. We're familiar with this type of
I think
anger.
that feeds in once again to
The
this
story of
idea
Trump
about
is the story
just
about
what we
how
believe
this type of
hard
anger
is in
carried
American
Trump to
culture, or
victory
when
in
doing
the Rust
something
Belt.
difficult means.
But Ken isn't the only one who's angry. A lot of people are angry.
Yeah,
But
Jari,
why
the
is it
cognitive
that we
load of
hear
fact-checking
so much
randos?
about Ken's anger and not others? There are people like Ken who are black, whose communities have also been destroyed by deindustrialization on top of suburban flight, over-policing, mass incarceration, and Ken's new co-workers are probably more similar to Ken than he thinks. They probably share a lot of Ken's values about God and family. They're trying their best to learn Ken's language, and they at least try to say good morning, but Ken doesn't ever say it back. And just like Ken, they're overworked, underpaid, and alienated. They too are angry, because everyone is angry.
But if someone who disagrees with Ken gets angry, well, they're violent. They're radical.
They've grown increasingly violent because they understand that they are losing. They are losing a lot of turf.
But if Ken gets angry and storms the Capitol, well, that's just what you get for being so mean.
You can only insult and poke people in the eye for so long until they're going to burst.
Popular anger is the symptom of a society ill-equipped to deal with conflict. When we're told to pretend that identity is just a free-floating surface, just a thing that you have to respect, a consumer group at which to target ads, and not a social force tied to money, power, and history, well, then inevitably that repressed conflict is going to make a return. We can feel that conflict in our bones. And when we're forced to choose between a candidate who denies the existence of conflict altogether,
Donald Trump's dark and divisive vision, he offered a lot of fear and anger. You could listen to that speech and...
I'm actually going to pause it for a moment because I both want to bring up something Elman and Jari are talking about, but also I'm going to have to go to a break and swap out the camera battery in a moment just to give you all a heads up on that. The cognitive load of fact-checking randos and the intentional asymmetrical campaign of just disinfo and not knowing who or where to trust. This gets back to some of the Umberto Eco we read during Doom Eternal, where the point is for there to be an aura of confusion just within the fascist culture. It prevents the fascist opponents from being able to identify, nail down, and act in time. If, you know, nothing's true, it creates doubt in a way that's real fucked up. All right, I took on orders. I'm going to take their ceramics, their metals, all the crystals I can. Hopefully this is enough for a road. I needed like 1,700 and then I invested some. Okay, gang, I'm gonna halt here before the camera battery gets too far down the line there. We'll be back in a moment. It is 4:32, so yeah, we're about halfway through the stream. It's a good time for a break. Stand up, stretch, rehydrate. Be kind to your skeleton. We're gonna keep following this history of Charlie Kirk. I'm digging it. It's very dense, so apologies if I'm missing out on the chat or letting it play for a bit, but I do want to shout out the Know Your Enemy podcast, because a lot of the kind of tracing of older right-wing heritage into newer right-wing skin that we see going on here, that's a bit of a consistent and current project at the Know Your Enemy pod, and I've really enjoyed their output. It's been something that's helped me make more sense about our current moment. Much like the works of Octavia Butler here, you know, it's showcasing how these things exist in continuity, and it's less exhausting, less surprising when you start to understand history in this way, because the moment doesn't always constantly seem like appallingly new and unprecedented. We actually are living in precedented times, and we can get through them. Anyways, we're going to go on break. Be right back. All right, we're going to get back to that Avenia video. Real quick before we start back up, I just want to bring up, because we were talking about the asyncretism of fascism and such right before the drop here with Nick Shirley and disinformation and just overwhelming and exhausting people with information. What if Jeffrey Epstein was just a cool guy? What if everything the FBI is saying about there being no further shadowy stuff going on, it just is what it is? Suppose that were true. Just best faith, you give the government that. Does that mean the rest of what the U.S. government is just a complete fine and like okay, like moral endorsement, sign off? Everything else is fine. I had a few questions about the dude with the island, but now that's out of the way. No questions about drones. No questions about when we're getting healthcare. No questions about when we're getting any kind of housing reforms. No questions about any social safety net fixes or when we're going to stop having private police forces abusing people in the streets. Complete moral sign-off, every other sector. Just, I just had a few questions about that Mr. Epstein fellow. What if he was just a gamer, right? 3-2, everybody's just very mad at this dude for gaming. And he just, I mean, what if? What if we're just all making this big hubbub? You can look away from the files. But it brings up the whole thing I'm trying to get at here, which is just like with the asyncretism, the purpose is to keep you measuring and measuring and remeasuring and going like, well, we'll get this to court one day. We'll get this to court one day. The truth will get out there. The truth will get out there. And you're so busy measuring and measuring and measuring and gawking and gawking and gawking. And the next thing you know, there's like five new camps built in El Paso, Texas. And suddenly, hey, if you're late on your job and you've committed theft of time consistently, guess what? You're deported. Yeah. Holy shit, man. Holy shit. All right, we're gonna keep watching this video. We're not gonna get too thick into it. In this scenario, would he still be an intelligence asset? Good question, Jari. Because you know what? What if he just won the lottery? What if all those Mossad ties aren't real either?
You could think, my goodness, he believes America is in decline.
Or someone who not only acknowledges conflict, but revels in it.
They're not coming after me, they're coming after you, and I just happen to be standing in their way. And it is the enemy from within, and they're very dangerous.
Well, I'm not surprised that millions of Americans made the choice they did. Even though Trumpism offers no solutions and actively hurts the most vulnerable Americans, if he seems to be the only one able to give your anger a name, an identity, then of course people followed him off a cliff. And all Democrats did was deny.
That the hateful language they hear from public figures on TV does not represent the true spirit of this country.
Charlie Kirk wasn't always a fan of Trump. After all, he started his career as one of those conservative neoliberals who worshipped the market. But he also understood that the anger underlying Trump's popularity couldn't simply be ignored. As Kirk wrote in his book, The MAGA Doctrine,
Republicans have been playing the part of hectoring moralists. Trump reversed that, revealing what young conservatives already knew. The future of the Democrat Party is whiners and killjoys. The future of the Republican Party is winners.
So how would Charlie Kirk find a way to win the young? Same way as Trump. Give anger a face and a name. TPUSA's initial public reach wasn't very good. Take their YouTube channel. 10 years later, these early videos still struggled to reach even 5,000 views. But the first video to truly pop off on the Turning Point USA channel was uploaded in 2017. It was titled, Charlie Kirk Destroys Democratic Socialism. It was the first of a familiar format. Kirk standing at a podium, taking a question from an audience member. Kirk responds with a fiery, confident takedown. The debate clip pops off. It gets hundreds of thousands of views. A few months later, they try the format again. Socialist admits their real agenda. Boom. Charlie smashes socialism.
The real
Top 5
agenda.
takedowns of 2017. Boom. 2 million views. Slowly, TPUSA started to understand what worked. Charlie Kirk, taking a question from a college student who frankly isn't super well researched on the topic, Kirk rhetorically maneuvers his way around the question in a way that makes the leftist interlocutor look weak. Why does it work? Well, I don't know, it's cathartic. It's exactly what a young Charlie Kirk would have probably watched. It's everything he always wanted to be. To win the argument, show his power, feel special. Young conservative-minded people watching this content probably felt the same. Even special.
I need to be gentler.
They're in
with
some
my
cool little
cargo.
club. Charlie's a guy who really gets it. Charlie's smart and unique, just like me. Like a snowflake. Thus began Charlie's career in owning the libs, fanning the flames of conflict, and calling it free speech.
I'm a free speech absolutist, through and through. Aristotle said we are the speaking beings, that our capacity to communicate is who we are.
Huh, the Greeks, huh? Well, if we're gonna get gay about it, we might learn a thing or two from those Greeks, considering that, you know, they invented democracy. Although, can you really trust such an olive-heavy society? In ancient Athenian democracy, parrhesia, sometimes translated as frank or open speech, was a key force in civic life. It's analogous to free speech today, but it's not quite the same. You couldn't just say whatever you wanted or call your enemies pansies for fun. Underlying parrhesia was a set of ethical principles. Political speech is an act of speaking truth to power. For this act to be meaningful, though, the speaker has to be taking on some level of risk. If someone is willing to risk their life for a truth, then they must really believe it, right?
Parrhesia
And I
has
mean
an
genuine
earnesty
risk.
to it.
Pundits whose
Oh my.
organization is funded by billionaire elites risk very little, which isn't to say that political figures don't get, famously assassinated, but that's the type of risk that's inherent to being any type of public figure at all. The risk we're talking about here is something like getting arrested or murdered by the state. Risk isn't the only thing that's important, though. Being edgy for its own sake is empty. Parrhesia is supposed to be a helpful exercise in political truth. You're supposed to see your interlocutor as a fellow citizen, someone who you hope benefits from your words. True parrhesia appeals to universal political principles, not just to your side. Was that what Charlie was doing when he uploaded a video whose title starts with "Charlie Kirk unloads on woke lib"? Truly powerful political speech must be an earnest exercise in truth. Is it good faith and truth-seeking for Charlie to text his mentor, "Can you please send me quotes from Jefferson or the founders that were negative on Islam, please?" Yes, that's a real text. And no, it's
I
not
love
good
the
faith
affect he
truth-seeking.
delivered that with.
He was a person who instrumentalized rhetoric for cultural victory, which is exactly antithetical to why free speech exists in the first place. Charlie believed that speech functioned like a market. A free market.
What we need is a robust marketplace of speech where the best ideas can win.
According to him, if we just channel all of our conflicts into speech, then we can resolve all of society's problems through speech.
It's a very fragile line that we live in. And you know what keeps that line? Do you know what prevents us from going into situations like this? One thing: freedom of speech.
But that doesn't work because it ignores
Yeah,
that speech
Jari,
itself
I don't know
is a
about the
part
line of
social
violence
conflict. It
being
even
backing up the
produces
assertion
social
of
conflict.
risk. I do
What we
think there
perceive
has to be a degree of
reasonable
like
depends on
earnesty
who's speaking,
or like
the context, the tone of their voice, the speed at which they
sincere or
talk,
straightforward
the medium
intent,
of the
I guess.
message,
No
and of course,
duplicity
whether
would
or
be
not
kind
the
of like
speaker
what I'm
is a
thinking of.
media-trained pundit on a goddamn podium.
If you're a liberal or leftist watching this video, a person of color, a non-Christian, an immigrant,
There has to be like
even someone
an
who
agreed
has
upon
ever
like
voted
greater
for a
good you're
Democrat.
already in pursuit of or
People
already
like Charlie Kirk
deliberated
never
on
wanted to debate you. They wanted you gone.
in this framing.
How do I know this?
Which
Because
again, getting
I
back to the
debated
measuring
Charlie
and measuring
Kirk.
and measuring and
In the
measuring
fall of
again thing.
2019,
At
I
what
was a
point is
freshman
it
at
enough
Brown
that you've like
University.
measured
In
and
my
analyzed
first
what Kirk
semester
was
at
doing
Brown,
in
it was
earnest and
announced
like
that Charlie Kirk,
can
the
just
famous
say
conservative
if he was just being
commentator,
cynical.
would be paying a visit to the university to give a talk and debate students. It would be the first time that
Or
Charlie Kirk
enterprising.
had visited an Ivy League
Because
university.
I mean, stuff like that
And
text where
for
it's
good
like, please
reason,
give me notes
his
to own.
last.
It's like,
My
well,
friends
yeah, it's
decided to
clearly
make
a
shitty
cynical, like
protest signs for the
profiteering
night.
endeavor.
Here's a picture
It's
from
not
the Providence
about
Journal of me and my bud in front of the building where Charlie was about to speak. So I didn't arrive in time to make my own
risking
sign,
your
and as a
sense of
result,
ego
I'm
and being
holding
wrong
literally
and
the most
learning
confusing
something
sign
new.
ever. It quotes Charlie Kirk in big letters where he once said, "Donald Trump is the most moral president ever," which to us was a self-evidently bad quote, but it just looks like I'm holding up a sign that says, "Donald Trump is the most moral president ever." But whatever. It comes time for the event. Me and my friends wiggle our way to the back of the auditorium. Apparently, the event wasn't being filmed. No cameras or recording devices allowed. It's kind of weird, right? But we didn't think much of it. Charlie comes out on stage. The Brown Republican Club, sitting front and center, goes wild. Charlie starts giving his speech. It wasn't anything earth-shattering, just a collection of stupid talking points. Men shouldn't be in women's sports, abortion is murder, the usual shit that's supposed to rile up college students in 2019. Then came the Q&A portion. We all ran for the opportunity to talk to him. I don't remember all of the specifics of the night, but I do remember my fellow Brown students being, for the most part, sharp, precise, intellectually good faith, put together. Charlie, on the other hand, interrupted students, tried to maneuver the conversation away from the main point.
Yeah,
and at some point he started to get
attention,
frustrated,
whether
even
it was for
flustered.
cynically
There were
or not
points where
cynically
Charlie
believing
even
in what he was
conceded,
doing does
because
reaffirm
as it
in some
turns
way.
out, when he's talking to people who
you're on
actually
you're on the path
understand
of the
what
God
they're
you
talking
worship.
about,
Like you're being
he
rewarded with
just
riches and
flounders.
attention. It's
Then my
lucrative.
turn
Why
came.
would you stop?
I asked Charlie about healthcare.
Regardless
I don't
of like
remember
what
much
you're
of the
doing, at some
specifics,
point
but
I think
remember
you
at
just
some
turn it
point
off and go like
just
it's
going
working.
in circles. I kept arguing that, hey, patients don't really have bargaining power in a free market healthcare system because if they don't receive treatment, then they're just going to die. And he said something to the effect of, well, I just think that capitalism promotes innovation and freedom in the medical sector. And I remember thinking, perhaps something that everyone who's been offered a mic at Charlie's events has thought, wow, I'm not really arguing with a person, am I?
Right.
Is this really what this is? A machine that's supposed to go round and round in circles? An endless ideological performance? It wasn't worth any more breath, to be honest. So I said, thank you, and let the next person ask a question. According to reports from the Brown newspaper and the Providence Journal that night, Charlie's night at Brown was something of a shit show.
During the Q&A, Kirk avoided answering questions by posing another question, or by signaling his staff to move the mic to the next person, Costa said. Someone in the crowd called out, "Show us the same respect we're showing you by listening without interrupting."
And truly, really, us students wanted to hear what he had to say. Charlie's events were never genuine efforts to challenge students' beliefs or an authentic engagement with ideas. And, well, I guess that's kind of obvious. But if there was ever any doubt, this event at Brown, where Charlie finally decided to take a chance at arguing with some of the most academically gifted students in the country, told me everything I needed to know. We were just guinea pigs to him, a test to see whether or not he could actually take the heat. And in the end, he couldn't. And there was probably a part of him that knew this. That's why there weren't cameras. That's why there's barely any evidence that this night even happened. Although I did manage to sneak this shitty recording of him walking off stage. Charlie never spoke at an elite college for years until near the end of his life, when he visited Oxford and Cambridge. You'd think that 6 years later something would have improved, right? We may live in a post-truth world, in part thanks to people like Charlie, but even if truth may never be the same again,
this road to have
lies
like a
are
shelter?
always lies.
This doesn't mean that speech is useless. What speech can do is make social conflicts intelligible. Speech can help us understand each other and make ourselves understood. That's a key part of democracy. But if all you're doing is unloading on woke, then you're just laundering your group's interests through the performance of democratic deliberation. Kirk never wanted to facilitate good faith debate between diverse thinkers. Instead, he wanted to push the interests of a particular white conservative identity. My evidence?
Yeah,
Well,
this is what
for
I do
one,
with
Turning Point
this is kind of like the
USA is an
downtime I like.
organization
I like
that's
filling
full
out
of
the map
racists.
and like
From the top to the
doing
bottom.
the infrastructure.
The former
There's something
TPUSA
about
National
the
Field Director Crystal Clanton once wrote in a text
earlier when you
message to another
complimented the
employee
truck
stating,
design,
and I
it's
do
something I like
apologize
about
for
the
repeating
game
this,
and something I
I
think
hate black people like
is the
fuck them all.
appeal in
I
a lot
hate
of
blacks. End of
Japanese
story. Well, I
cyberpunk
wonder what that
is
could mean.
this
What else
whole
did
idealized
TPUSA do to
version of
encourage
these
open debate on
technologies and
college
structures
campuses? Fix elections. According to several
that
reports,
in real world
Republican
practice are
donors
kind of
funneled
sitting with the
amounts of money
sins
into
of
university elections
imperialism
through
and
TPUSA,
war and
basically
this whole
rigging student
history
governments
of,
across
reality
America
with
by
them.
aggressively outspending competition.
Again, I'm
These
wondering how the
free speech
imperialism
warriors
stuff's going to
also
wrangle
started
around
the
because there
Professor
is
Watch
some
list, where any
allusion and
professor
pushing
critical
towards
of the
that
conservative
button in
agenda
the story,
was put
but
on a big public
overall,
list
I
where they
am
were
still,
then targeted for
fencing
harassment.
in
This is an
the
organization
prairies, so
that
to
from
speak.
its founding has represented the interests of a small minority of elites and the prejudices that benefit them. Despite this, Kirk, at least in his public life, has held firmly onto free market, idealistic American principles, at least at first.
America's just a placeholder for timeless ideas.
Even as his organization represented the interests
are
of
those
specific
timeless
dominant
ideas?
groups, around this time in 2019,
Grifting?
it still on the surface professed idealistic universal principles. This wasn't a contradiction unique to TPUSA. It is the contradiction at the heart of 21st century conservatism. How did they reconcile the facade of their colorblind free market principles with the reality of who these principles really benefit? This is the question that broke the right wing. And it all started with
Yeah, it's
this
actually been a moment
When
since I've been
Trump
on this side of
first
the
rose to
continent.
power,
I was in the mountains a
far-right
lot yesterday.
identitarian groups felt more emboldened than ever, to the point where even self-proclaimed Nazis began showing their faces in public without shame. But when Trump actually took office in 2017 and started implementing policies, far-right extremists weren't very pleased. Why wasn't he ushering the Christian nationalist racial utopia they had been hoping for? In fact, Trump wasn't doing much of anything. His only major legislative feat was cutting taxes for the rich. Globo homo was still intact. Charlie Kirk, being a generic neoliberal conservative at the time, didn't see much of a problem with Trump's actions. In fact, he was a Trump fanatic. This got Charlie in trouble with the far right. As the editor of one white nationalist publication wrote,
"We want Donald Trump to do what he said he was going to do.
Kirk and all of these other shills have attached themselves to Trump to push a big money corporatist, homosexualist, Zionist, globalist
homosexualist
At some
agenda.
point, the online world spilled into real
The
life.
most
Fans of
homosexual.
far-right
I'm the
streamer Nick
homosexualist.
Fuentes, also known as Groypers, crashed Charlie's 2019 tour with explicitly racist questions and other edgelord bait.
How does anal sex help us win the culture war?
Charlie wasn't happy.
You're
Cool.
bringing
5
some very
stars.
charged
We've
language.
maxed out our
We're gonna
rank
try to
here.
calm down the temperature in the room.
At this time, Charlie wasn't a fan of identitarianism, whether from woke identity groups or from white supremacists. That doesn't mean that his ideas didn't actively hurt minorities,
Oh, yeah,
but
I'm gonna get all these
there's a reason
resources.
that Charlie worked very hard to deny that fact. He believed in a world where ideas, speech, and policies could be separated from the material conflicts that create them. He, at the time, truly believed that America was just an idea, and only an idea. And ideas are for everyone, right?
I find that to be a racist question. I reject the idea behind it. The insinuation of your question is that somehow race and ideology are intertwined together.
But this is stupid because race and ideology are very obviously intertwined. What do you think racism is? Race itself is an ideology of difference and identity. It is a social, political, and symbolic way of organizing the world, otherwise known as an ideology. Charlie didn't understand this because, according to him, speech takes care of our conflicts and markets take care of our speech. At some point, though, the reality sets in. When you watch videos of Charlie dealing with the herd of racist white boys trying to challenge him, rapidly firing off their rehearsed anti-Semitic talking points,
Okay, I need
I'm
a place
reminded
with
of the stories of
ceramics.
Charlie as a young boy, debating his teachers, because maybe speech isn't an effective way of dealing with social conflict. Maybe markets aren't good at picking the best ideas. Maybe the public sphere is the site of conflict. It is where conflicts thrive. It is where new ones are generated and where old ones are re-articulated. Speech makes our conflicts understandable by translating these conflicts into ideas, ideologies,
Okay, this is gonna be a
identities.
very easy one.
But the worst thing we can do is cede collective control over speech to the dynamics of a market. When those gay-ass Greeks were inventing democracy, they understood that political speech must act as a pact between the speaker and the people. The people have the right to take the right of speech away, to decide when speech is being manipulated, to decide when speech violates ethics, and to decide when speech threatens democracy. This doesn't mean that a democratic society shouldn't have speech
No one
that's
saw that.
challenging, subversive, radical, world-shattering. It means that speech has to be grounded in some democratic ethic. If we submit speech to the logic of a free market, then you're basically killing the possibility of ethical speech. It's the death of democratic accountability, civic life, and truth-telling itself. Markets obfuscate the reality of conflicts. They make accountability obsolete. They make ethics impossible. Charlie Kirk preached that unrestrained speech would bring about peaceful resolution to conflict and struggle as he sits in front of a giant banner that says culture war. Charlie was in the business of conflict, not solving it. And perhaps at one point he genuinely believed in America, the idea, the creed, the principles, but at some point he also realized that ideas only get you so far. There was a culture war going on, and he intended on winning.
On May 25th, 2020, Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin murdered George Floyd after responding to a report that Floyd had used a counterfeit $20 bill. Multiple bystanders filmed the killing. Nearly 9 minutes of Chauvin kneeling on Floyd's neck as he pleaded for air, pleaded for his mother, then went silent.
When the footage and information about the case spread online, it ignited the largest protest movement in American history. Tens of millions of Americans took to the streets during the summer of 2020 under the banner of Black Lives Matter, a movement that had existed for years but now exploded into a full-scale racial reckoning amid pandemic, economic collapse, and social unrest. A lot of people fondly or pejoratively remember this time as peak woke, and in some ways that's true. Language around race became more systemic, more historical, and it opened the door for more sophisticated policy approaches, but it was only temporary. This language was immediately absorbed by Corporations and institutions filtered through HR departments and folded into the same liberal managerial culture that manages everything else shittily. We know the story. DEI became less about political struggle and material change and more about the regulation of speech, behavior, and tone. But conservatives blew it all out of proportion. Out of this moment came the Republican boogeyman we're stuck with today. Wokeness. Charlie Kirk and his fellow conservatives seized the opportunity to invent a new moral panic.
Here's the best way I can describe CRT to you. It's calling everything you don't like racist until you control it.
Now, obviously, this is a bad faith interpretation, but it's doing something rhetorically important. This was the groundwork for a dramatic change in conservative thought. It was at this moment in 2020, at the dawn of one of America's darkest chapters, that something in the conservative imaginary started to shift. Which brings us back to the question, what does it mean to be an American? Is America an idea or a people? Is America good? Is it worth conserving? Around this time, Charlie Kirk and other conservatives began to place these questions at the center of their thought. At first, it was indirect, just the subtext of the story they were about to tell. It began with a central conflict. America is under attack.
American tradition is now being put on the ropes by an unexpected villain.
Who is that villain? Woke.
We need to defeat this woke industrial complex forcibly and quickly, because that will destroy us all. It will destroy us from within quicker than any sort of domestic enemy ever could.
But according to Charlie, what is woke? What do they want?
How did we get to the place that we are in?
Charlie tells us a little story.
Well, put simply, post-1960s liberalism, they realized that to undermine the American nation, conflict is necessary to overflow the nation, not speech. Pitting people against each other. This is a doctrine of conflict politics.
He tells us
seems like the way to undermine the American nation is to privatize the healthcare
discourse
industry.
With conflicts politics,
which is rich against poor, man against woman.
And what was their target?
This idea of Western society is actually at the root of their critique.
And now he says these anti-Western radicals have taken over our institutions in a fundamental way.
No, it's the majority of people that run the colleges, that run our government, that run the tech companies.
Ah, yes, billionaires, notoriously the class of left-wing anti-racist radicals. But as silly as Charlie's story is, does he not notice the performative contradiction here? For someone who seems to think that conflict politics is at the root of all of our problems, this sure sounds like conflict politics. Are secret left-wing radicals really the ones undermining our institutions through division? Or might the problem be people like Charlie, the people actually funded by billionaire donors, literally crafting a conflict narrative before our eyes to justify their own political ends? But no, Charlie says that Democrats are the anti-American party. Which is weird because Republicans seem to be the ones who keep saying that America has fallen.
But America is now rapidly becoming an unsafe and, dare I say, more unpleasant place to live.
Meanwhile, Democrats naively preach about American goodness.
America is pretty darn great right now. America's making strides right now.
No, but Charlie is the one who's a patriot, right? Charlie is the one who truly loves America, despite the fact that he is the one arguing that every American institution is beyond saving.
Like, how do you revitalize an institution that's dominated by people who are aiming in the wrong direction?
They're irredeemable.
What is it that he wants to conserve? What is it that he wants to save? Because it's clearly not America.
That America as we know it will shatter into a million different pieces.
And that's why the America question is now central to the conservative imaginary.
The defining issue of the year of our Lord 2025, going into 2026, 2027, on the American right, is one that we are totally unprepared for, which is what is in American.
Which brings us to the Great American Horseshoe. Horseshoes are a classic trope in political analysis. It's the idea that extremists on the far left and far right share more in common with each other than with the political center. I want to say something about America
never having a true social reconciliation about what makes an American, but I kind of want to keep letting this rip
it's a
without
representation
talking.
of how the contemporary right
Once again, thank you all for joining Technopoverty.
A window into the mind of today's conservatives. Let's break it down. The horseshoe imagines how different groups answer the question, what is America? On one end, we have the far left's answer, not necessarily what leftists would actually answer, but how conservatives perceive how leftists would answer. Are you with me? On the other end, we have the far right's answer. Since this horseshoe represents the right wing's point of view, This would be their actual position. In the middle, we have the liberal view, which can lean left or right. I'd also argue that this is generally the liberal position in reality. Let's start with the libs in the middle. They argue, like Charlie Kirk once did in 2019,
Awesome job.
that America is an idea. It's the Constitution, it's freedom, liberty, and justice for all. These days, on the right wing, this way of thinking
How'd
is
you feel
going
about
out
that
of
chart
fashion.
with the libzone
One of the
graphic?
things
I
that
was
you hear people
chuckling a
say,
little.
even on our side, that you hear people say, is that America is the first creedal nation. Okay? America is an idea.
The right wing pushes back.
But America is not just an idea. It is a group of people with a common history and a common future.
Today's right wing argues that, yeah, America is a people. America does represent the interests of a particular group. And that's good, actually. Now, how do conservatives imagine the left would answer? According to the right, the far left believes that America fundamentally represents an oppressor class, basically white Christian men.
White English-speaking Christian males were taught that they were part of a oppressor class and must atone for their racial discretion.
The insistence that what you see in Western culture is the consequence of a male-dominated.
I feel that while I was taught America had a history of conquerors, conquistadors, slavers, slave drivers, and just generally bad dudes in charge, I can't ever think of a single instance in which it was individually placed in present tense blame terms on me as like a white passing man, or like I've just never seen a student receive anything like that. And so just anytime I hear like, oh, they're raising men and telling boys that they are ontologically evil because of American history, like, I mean, we can learn that the past had its problems, right? That doesn't mean that I'm carrying forward those sins unless you believe in some really weird, fucked up, I guess it really does get into the ontology of like, what do Americans even think is real, or what, yeah, all right, I'm gonna continue the essay.
Oppressive, self-serving society.
This means the system was set up for the benefit of white people.
They pretend that nobody else exists and that everything revolves around white people.
This caricature of the left is a direct mirror of the right-wing position. The left side of this horseshoe argues that America is a people, and that's bad, actually. The new right wing is in a battle over American peoplehood. They say that America is a people. They believe that the left's main goal is in destroying that people. Let's for now put aside the question of whether this is actually what leftism is about. This perceived conflict is the central conceit of American fascism today. The assertion that America is a people, a historically, culturally, and ethnically specific people, and that people is in opposition to a perceived enemy, the far left and other anti-Western forces.
It will destroy the country.
The right is fighting a defensive civilizational battle against an existential enemy. This is the right wing's 21st century rebellion against the 20th century, against globalism, neoliberalism, and pluralism.
National conservatism is a revolt against this fundamentally post-American ruling class. This revolt from the right is a revolt from the right, but also a revolt within the right. For too long, conservatives were content to serve as the right wing of the regime. They too waged foreign wars in the name of global liberalism and democracy. They too rewrote our trade policies in service of the interests of global capital.
This isn't a fringe ideology or a freaky mutation of conservative thought. This is American conservatism's natural conclusion, a reckoning with what conservatism has always acted upon even as it denied itself. The great American horseshoe is American conservatism regaining an awareness of the fact that it has always represented one particular side of a social struggle. This helps us make sense of conservatism's great paradoxes. Like, isn't it weird how old school conservatives wanted to ban gay marriage despite hating big government? Or how they claim to be pro-life, but also cut welfare programs that feed children? Well, it's because these people don't have principles, silly. Conservatives, at least the ones actually involved in political decision-making, have always been primarily concerned with protecting the interests of a specific social class and the hierarchies that benefit those classes. The free market is actually pretty good at maintaining social hierarchies through economic inequality. So, in the 20th century, social conservatives strategically partnered with economic conservatives so that they could both get the outcomes that they wanted. Economic conservatives offered to secure social conservatives the money and power that they wanted. And social conservatives offered economic conservatives a popular culture war narrative. As dark money conservative donor David Koch said in 2014,
I'm a conservative on economic matters, and I'm a social liberal.
But conservative candidates you support, many of them
Such a popular phrase in the early aughts.
Well, that's their problem.
All he cares about is protecting the interests of a dominant group.
I'm really focused intensely on economic and fiscal issues.
Here's the thing, though. A truly free market doesn't always preserve old hierarchies. Its primary aim is growth, self-reproduction, iteration. It doesn't care about your community, your church, your hometown. It will build a McDonald's wherever it wants. While capitalist markets have historically preserved social hierarchies like racism and sexism, these capitalist markets would just as easily destroy them. If traditional ideas suddenly become incompatible with the free market, the market will make a correction. The free market does not care. Billionaire social conservative donors
you will
like the
become
Henleys
35 and the market will stop catering to you with its ads and you will feel alienated.
But as diversity and non-traditional interests became more popular among
I think that's a big unspoken part of American culture too,
and now
is people
the free market has come to bite
experience that
conservatism
and they feel extremely disposable because
the lie of the West, of modernity,
we're
the last 30 years is that we're going to have you live and let live and there will be no moral standard. That itself is a moral standard. And it's a really bad one.
Conservatives have come to re-examine themselves, and Charlie Kirk is the prime example. Once upon a time, Charlie Kirk was an unironic neoliberal shill.
Neoliberalism has lifted billions of people out of poverty in Southeast Asia, all over the world.
But later in his life, he abandoned the neoliberal framework he once worshipped.
Kind of Western government collusion that's going to keep the failed project of neoliberalism going.
We believe neoliberalism has been a failed experiment in the modern era.
Because you're bashing neoliberalism, right? Which I totally agree with.
Why? Because it's not convenient anymore. This helps explain a lot. The rise of racialized populism, right-wing authoritarianism, Christian nationalism, all of these seemingly new trends are simply manifestations of something conservatism has always been, the expression of a dominant group's social interests. Do not be fooled by today's right-wing reappropriation of the language of social struggle. These are not populists. The rise of fascism is conservatism's rediscovery of its own truth. If we want to understand why the Republican Party has changed, or I guess not changed, but become more of itself, we have to understand how Charlie changed. Around 2020, as social struggle became central to conservative politics, Kirk underwent a series of profound political changes.
2020 was peak woke, where I was starting to understand that this was a manifestation of a spiritual struggle.
Charlie was always deeply religious, but early in his career, he insisted on keeping religion and politics separate.
Christian conservatives fell for a trap that they really should have rejected. But I think where the line was crossed is in the 60s and 70s and 80s, where we tried to impose those beliefs through government policy.
He unambiguously defended the separation of church and state.
We do have a separation of church and state, and we should support that.
Which makes sense. At the time, he was a classical liberal.
We're not a theocracy. We never have been.
He believed religion and politics represented two fundamentally different spheres of life. But later in his career, Charlie made some new friends. He started hanging with folks like Rob McCoy, a prominent Christian nationalist pastor who sees the Christian church as a political force. McCoy is an advocate of the Seven Mountains Mandate, an extremist movement that believes Christians are commanded to seize control over all spheres of American society. This includes spheres like religion, obviously, but also education, family, media, arts, entertainment, business, and government. They, without exaggeration, seek to establish a Christian theocracy ruled by biblical principles.
We should always try to impact everything for God's purpose. Music, arts, entertainment, business, finance, and yes, even government and civic life.
By 2020, Charlie Kirk had fully embraced the Seven Mountains Mandate and fused it with MAGA doctrine.
If the church does not take its proper role, then the country and the republic
will be gone as we know it.
He framed Trump as a providential figure, uniquely positioned to restore Christian dominance.
Finally, we have a president that understands the 7 mountains of cultural influence.
This shift ended up being good for business. Kirk's turn towards Christian nationalism brought in tens of millions of dollars in donations to TPUSA, aligning Kirk's financial incentives with his religious activism. By then, he had completely abandoned the liberal secular principles he once professed.
Separation of church and state. First of all, that's not in the U.S. Constitution.
Come on, Charlie, it's the First Amendment of the Constitution. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof.
Like, the more actual contextual understanding you get of, like,
what do you think Founding Father
Kirk
John
was
Adams
preying
meant
on
when he
and
wrote,
what
the government of the United States of America is
devices
not
he
in
was
any
using
sense
to
founded on the
climb to
Christian
the
religion.
metaphorical top as far as
I don't
earning
know.
money goes.
It's one
it really
thing to
does
argue
feel
that
biblically
Christianity
ironic
is
in
central
some
to
ways
American
where
culture,
his life
that
ended up.
Christianity influenced the Founding Fathers, all of which are defensible claims. But no, Charlie argued that America is and always has been a nation for Christians by Christians.
Considering, how fucked up the ideology of Christian nationalism is and the kind of trafficking.
Who was Christian. Common law is an outgrowth
It's one of those
of the
things too,
scriptures.
intentional or
Let's go to 3 principles of
unintentional.
common
What
law.
he's
Presumption of
trafficking
innocence,
in is something that will attract the attention of bad forces.
My apologies to anyone who knows anything about philosophy or history, as you've surely lost your will to live by now. But we know it doesn't matter because this isn't about truth. He's here to sell a narrative about an America in crisis, about a country he believes will die if it loses the
in order to make that narrative true,
one of the reasons we're living through a constitutional crisis is that we no longer have a Christian nation, but we have a Christian form of government.
This is part of what I think fascinates me about Eddington.
If you do not have a Christian population.
Ari Aster, when you first watch Eddington, knowing he's more of a horror guy, you're kind of like, well, this is different. But
it starts with naming the identity they seek.
Different in some ways. Like, I do see Eddington as a contemporary Western deconstruction type deal, which, none of Aster's other movies are. It's also a horror movie in which the monster is a genie, and the genie is your phone.
Justifies extraordinary action.
You will get the reality you want and you wish for from the machine.
Never had much of those.
It's just, monkey's paw. Be careful what comes with that wish.
To him. They gave him these ideas. At the time he started repeating them, Charlie was making some new friends. Behind the scenes, Kirk and other prominent right-wing figures were being mentored by professional ideologues affiliated with a place called the Claremont Institute. Here in this relatively unassuming office center next to a Domino's lies the intellectual headquarters of American fascism. They taught Charlie everything he needed to know. On paper, the Claremont Institute is just another right-wing conservative think tank. But according to Charlie,
it's the intellectual home of the new right.
Claremont is much more than just
there's a bunch of ceramics
It is
here,
the philosophical core of American fascism today.
Jackpot.
Not that American fascists are intellectually serious in any way, but Claremont's job is in making fascism appear intellectually serious. They make authoritarianism feel historically grounded, morally urgent, and intellectually legitimate. They groom influential figures on the right by teaching them this tight narrative of American decline.
A lot of people don't even know about the Claremont Institute. Like, they don't even have no idea what the Claremont Institute is. And those who know, they know. Right? So
that's why I'm here.
Claremont has deep ties to Republican power. They've worked with Ron DeSantis, Clarence Thomas, J.D. Vance, tons of Trump administration officials, and a long list of media figures including Christopher Rufo, Michael Knowles, Ben Shapiro, Laura Ingraham, Mark Levin. Guys, the list goes on. And yes, of course, it includes Charlie Kirk. So what's going on with these Claremonters? When Trump first became popular, people believed that he was going to be some temporary blip in world history, that things would eventually get back to normal, that soon enough neoliberalism would be back on schedule to end history. But the Claremont Institute was different. Claremont planted its flag firmly in the Trump camp. They argued that Trump was a symptom of a profound crisis, and perhaps the only cure to that crisis. That argument formally crystallized in an essay published in one of the Claremont Institute's publications,
I finally have enough ceramics.
The Flight 93 Election by Michael Anton. The infamous essay frames the 2016 race as a hijacked plane on 9/11 barreling towards destruction.
If you don't try, death is certain. To compound the metaphor, a Hillary Clinton presidency is Russian roulette with a semi-auto. With Trump, At least you can spin the cylinder and take your chances.
The essay went viral, an early sign of the political future to come. And when Trump won the election, Trump rewarded the Claremont Institute for its early loyalty. Michael Anton ended up working for the first Trump administration and remains a MAGA figurehead to this day.
So I see Michael Anton back there. He's the most brilliant.
Since then, Claremont's main purpose has been in providing the Trump administration and Trump's actions with a philosophical grounding. It sounds trivial, but this type of work plays an important part in analyzing fascism.
Damn.
What is the Claremont Institute's overall aim? They themselves say that
the mission of the Claremont Institute is to restore the principles of the American founding to their rightful, preeminent authority in our national life. Those principles include the foundational doctrines of natural right.
Now, I mentioned earlier, like,
law,
Obama's Flint thing was maybe the thing that finally really got me over the DNC, but I think one of the first times I really felt kind of depressed about what the Democratic Party had to offer was like...
And that's by design. They start
during the
from a
Bush
vague
era,
philosophical
a friend of my parents, I would just be like, oh, I think America's a dying empire in decline. We're just on our way out. And there wasn't like any optimistic salve or even like consideration of reconciling like the present with like what was currently happening with W.
That's not the story.
Just like this was before there was even like Obama optimism for liberals to latch onto, and I just realized like a 12, 13-year-old being like, well, that's cool, man. I'm gonna be an adult in 10 years and can't really hinge on that as an operative outlook on life.
The things he believed and why his beliefs changed over time. Part of that requires trying to genuinely understand the Claremont Institute and its profound impact on Kirk's political strategy. Even though American fascism has the intellectual depth of an armpit, it's an armpit worth smelling. Do we need deodorant or a shower? When Charlie Kirk drove down that tree-lined suburban street, past the Yoshinoya, past the Domino's, and walked through the doors of the Claremont Institute to start his Lincoln Fellowship in 2021, they were about to teach him a view of the world that would change his entire life. What Charlie learned at the Claremont Institute was the final nail in the coffin in his transformation from American idealist to American fascist. It is perhaps the most dangerous, most consequential lesson plan in the history of contemporary American politics. And I'm about to give it.
In 1979, four chuds, inspired by their professor Harry V. Jaffa, founded the Claremont Institute in the hopes of preserving his intellectual legacy. Jaffa was an influential conservative political thinker in the 1950s and 60s, known for producing an American version of his own favorite philosopher, Leo Strauss. To understand Claremont and the New Right, we have to understand Strauss.
Sorry, y'all, I'm going to step away for a moment. My nose is a little drippy.
Jumping in front of a moving train? Well, let's find out. Leo Strauss was a German-American philosopher active in the middle of the 20th century. Ultimately, he was a critic of modernity. He argued that modern values offer no moral or spiritual direction, leading to a type of corrosive nihilism unsustainable in any society. And yeah, whatever. He's not the first or last person to propose the idea that modernity makes us empty and sad. But Strauss was nice enough to offer something of a solution. According to him, the answer to the crisis of modernity lies in classical philosophy, particularly Western classical philosophy. Is this about to be racist? Let's put a pin in that. According to Strauss, Western civilization is great because it is based on a fundamental conflict within itself, the struggle between two types of civilizational wisdoms, Athens and Jerusalem, between philosophical and biblical wisdom, between reason and revelation. On the one hand, the tradition of Athens, rationality, skepticism, observation. On the other hand, Jerusalem, faith, reverence, revelation. So, that's a nice story, Leo, but whether this is a historically or philosophically accurate portrayal of these respective cultures is up to debate. And it is a little weird to just brush aside the influence of Islam on Western culture and classical philosophy, which makes you wonder, is this just Western chauvinism dressed up in philosophical language? Good question. This is part of what makes Strauss so appealing. Like, wouldn't it just be easier if we could find the solution to complex problems in something old and familiar? Something known, yet far away enough to still be mysterious? Let's put a pin in that.
For now, let's think of Strauss's
Jari,
dichotomy
you're making
here
me think of the
more
Claremont
as two
Institute
different
having its own
archetypes
version of
of
like an
wisdom rather than
e-reader,
actual
except instead of
historical
themes,
things. Rational
it's just like your
observation
wokeness
and
level,
dedicated
like
faith both
how
have their
corrupted by
place in the
PC
pursuit of truth.
degeneracy are
Doesn't
you?
all reason to some extent
How culturally
require
Marxist
faith
have you been
in an external world,
converted?
a belief in causes and effects? Doesn't all faith require a reasoned evaluation
love this
of
backdrop.
your practices and in your object of faith? This is a tension that is elegant and interesting. As Strauss saw it, this contrast is inherent to truth and thought itself.
Philosophy and Bible are the alternatives or the antagonists in the drama of the human soul. Each of the two antagonists claims to know or to hold the truth, the decisive truth, the truth regarding the right way of life.
But we have to be careful here because Strauss is making an argument about Western greatness here, which, you know, now I'm just in a fucking minefield, aren't I? Let's just say that we can appreciate what's uniquely valuable about Socrates and Plato and Jesus and rabbinical wisdom and Roman architecture without being weird and racist about it. Can you? But on the conversation of wisdom, Strauss believed that reason and revelation were fundamentally incompatible. You either live your life in the pursuit of knowledge of the good, or you dedicate your life to what you already believe is self-evidently good. You can't have it both ways. This incompatibility isn't necessarily bad, though. Conflict isn't always destructive. It can be generative, too. But not all conflicts can be resolved. And maybe not all conflicts should be. Harry V. Jaffa, the person whom the Claremont Institute is essentially dedicated to, was a Straussian. And even after reading all of Strauss's warnings that, no, you cannot synthesize Athens and Jerusalem, they're incompatible, it's a lost cause, don't do it, stop it.
The whole history of the West shows us one attempt.
The whole point of fascism is the asyncretism.
But all these syntheses, as far as a
it's telling the people you can have your cake and eat it too.
The harmony is impossible.
After all of that, Jaffa said, nah, sorry Strauss. According to Dr. Jaffa, the West actually has synthesized the conflict between Athens and Jerusalem. And that synthesis is called America.
The unprecedented character of the American founding is
this reminds me of like Glenn Beck's 2,000 year or 5,000 year miracle. I don't think Glenn Beck actually wrote it, but he heavily promoted it back in the early aughts.
Any political decisions
just like this argument that between the crucifixion and the founding of America, the founders made just like a ginormous leap in thought, and like we should just really love the founding fathers for that. And it totally disregards that there's literally 5,000 years of philosophical development between those 2 points.
Or speech, leaving aside the question of its practice or deeds, the best regime.
Surely this time we've done it, Leo. For real this time. In essence, Jaffa packaged American exceptionalism into a new political philosophy. It turned America into a quasi-metaphysical truth, thus providing the potential justification for whatever horrific thing America has done, can do, or will do. Jaffa, his students, and other American Straussians have their fingers all over American conservative thought. They helped Bill Buckley build his National Review. They built the Claremont Institute. They helped George W. Bush kill millions of people. They helped get Trump into the White House, and they made Charlie Kirk into the person he was. What does it mean to govern like a Straussian? Well, as it turns out, Straussians are pretty suspicious of democracy and popular sovereignty. One of Strauss's problematic faves, Plato, once raised the question of whether effective political governance might require politicians to lie sometimes. Scholars have dubbed this idea the noble lie. You know, the people don't always know what's best for them, so sometimes maybe you gotta make shit up, right?
Now, Strauss had a complicated view of noble lies. Or rather, he had a complicated and sneaky justification for them. He starts with a premise that is undeniably true.
Because in a way, aren't all governments built on lies? Like, fundamentally, there is nothing that ties citizens together other than the pure chance of being born at a certain place and a certain time. That's why countries invent national myths to invent solidarity among citizens. But who invents these myths according to Straussians? Who should invent these myths?
These are legitimate questions.
We're heading back north, we're
Straussians
finishing this
offer an
job,
answer
and then
that
we'll
leads us
probably
down a
expand the roads
dangerous
and call it a
path.
wrap
According
for
to
tonight.
Straussians, only the elite
Getting about
and
that
wise
time,
could ever
gang.
construct noble lies. Lies so noble that they overcome the inherent myth of nationhood. Strauss
Although I
didn't
love what this video is
argue
doing
that
with
elites
Strauss. This has been a
should get
great,
to lie
great
with
walk.
reckless
It has been
abandon.
worth its pace.
But he didn't exactly say they
This essay
shouldn't
is
lie.
quality.
The truly wise would know when and how to lie, and surely they'll know how to construct lies so good that they promote flourishing society. Surely. And who are the truly wise? Oh, well, Straussians, of course.
Of course.
But the thing about Straussians is that they often depart so greatly from Strauss's own thought that the label Straussian starts to become less of a philosophical commitment and more of the name of an elitist club. As political scientist Ann Norton writes,
there is the story of the Straussians, which is properly two stories. The story of the philosophical lineage of Leo Strauss and the story of a set of students taking that name, regarded by others and themselves as a chosen set of initiates into a hidden teaching.
To be a Straussian, as the individuals at the Claremont Institute are, is not to actually care about the integrity of Strauss's philosophy. American Straussianism is simply the name of a political strategy. It is the name a group of elitists have given to the idea of political elitism itself. Now, Jaffa had similar ideas to Strauss on noble lies. Neither of them thought that governments should be dominated by something as unstable as one individual person's wisdom or judgment. That easily leads to tyranny. But leaders shouldn't be too truthful either. No. Only the wise can handle the esoteric knowledge required to govern. Only the wise would know when to make the final call. According to Jaffa,
the appeal to the right of wisdom is more likely than not to result in tyranny. The essence of the political problem is to combine the necessity for wisdom with the necessity for consent.
The wise can't just do whatever they want. They also have to genuinely convince people of their way. But don't we see a problem here? Who shall decide the wise? Who shall decide the limits on the wise? The other wise? Don't we need standards? Otherwise, the other wise might say otherwise. Will all of this just be self-evident? This Straussian tradition is alive and well in today's Republican Party. The Claremont Institute and its influential Republican associates see themselves as divinely inspired and endlessly wise elites tasked with producing the noble lies that'll restore America back to its civilizational greatness.
As well.
The mission of the Claremont Institute
but I'm on a
is to save
right
Western
now.
civilization.
Noted for
Do you
later.
think these elites are actually wise? Or are they just rich? Because as it turns out, the Claremont Institute is funded by the same network of dark money conservative billionaire donors we've been talking about this entire video. Coke-backed foundations, oil tycoons, tax-dodging elites. It's the same people, the
it's
same
all been
story,
a marionette
the same small minority
perpetuated
of
by
rich people with
billionaires
unpopular
for decades?
and undemocratic ideas
Holy
who
shit.
entrust professional pundits with selling their propaganda. And what's even worse is that they're just such losers.
This Claremont Institute podcast episode on Jaffa is the perfect representation of Claremont's civilizational wisdom. Our hosts, two dudes who have made their midlife crisis into America's problem, one of whom is Michael Anton, Mr. Flight 93 election himself, both of them gushing over their philosophy husband, which is fine. I'd let Pierre Bourdieu teach me about masculine domination any day. But the intellectual circle jerk before us,
as the kids say, based,
is obviously a pathetic attempt from a couple of insipid fascists desperately clinging on to any last bit of relevance by throwing around 4chan internet slang.
Jaffa was pretty based. They think that they're based. You can't be based. Based.
All to score points with basement-dwelling incels. Meanwhile, half of the
That was
comment
Lil B,
section
right?
is
Thank you,
anti-Semitic
Base
dog
God.
whistles rebuking Jaffa for being Jewish.
Black hip-hop
Wow,
artist
it really
none of
is
these
the
men
intellectual
have
home of the
probably
new
ever
right.
heard of.
Claremont fashions itself as America
They think
and
like
Western
Asmongold invented
civilization's
the term.
last great defense against anti-American forces. They train their right-wing proteges to repeat this narrative endlessly, which is exactly what Charlie did.
You mean Western civilization? The place where reason and revelation met into one?
Wonder where he got that from.
Well, the West is the best blend of reason and revelation.
Daddy, how do
As
I
Harry
get
Jaffa
talking
would say,
points
it's
for
the blend
debate?
of the ideas of Athens and Jerusalem.
Claremont taught Charlie that America is the West's greatest achievement, a sacred synthesis of reason and faith, and that now this great synthesis is under attack from an insidious leftist insurgency.
The Democratic Party has been taken over by its radical wing.
Well, if Claremont says that America is cooked, according to them, the wise elites have to rise up to save it. They seek a mythic leader, one who can gracefully deliver the noble lies.
I don't understand why this bridge was built, but cool.
Trump
cool.
gives us a chance to preserve the American way of life. Biden likely will be party to its destruction.
Oh, okay. It's up to Trump and the Republicans to save America, to restore its peoplehood, its civilizational progeny. If institutions are compromised, well, I guess they have to fall.
They're irredeemable.
The people must be cleansed. Democracy must be temporarily paused.
I'm not a fan of democracy.
Everything must be burned, and in the ashes, the right will fashion a new regime. Here we see Christian nationalism, Straussian elitism, and Trumpism collapsing into the same project. American fascism. People like Charlie Kirk learned to stop caring about democracy and to start preparing for its replacement. But surely that's just the worst case scenario, right? Surely their plan is still just a theory, just an inkling of an idea. Surely there's still time, right? The 2020 election was not a normal election. It was not your typical battle over ideas or policy or the usual shit-slinging we've come to expect from American politics. By the time the 2020 election rolled around, MAGA conservatives were pretty much done with liberal democracy, and Charlie Kirk was one of them. Republicans were talking about existential struggle. And if we're talking about existential struggle, then who gives a shit about democratic institutions,
She needs her
right?
gamer fuel,
Don't take my
right?
word for it. Here's how the Claremont Institute framed it.
The coming election is not about personality.
That's a lot of energy drink.
It's not about policies
Just
either.
a whole
What
kegger.
the election is about is the character of America.
According to Republicans, Democrats are the ones calling for systemic collapse.
I get it.
Biden now frequently
I indulge
talks
in gorilla
about
mind.
systemic racism. If racism is
Just a
systemic,
barrel of creatine.
then the
Let's
system
go.
must be overturned. This conclusion seems inescapable to me.
Of course, we know Joe Biden and the Democratic Party didn't want to overturn the system. My evidence? Well, he was president and it didn't happen. The only mainstream political party in the US calling for the destruction of institutions are the Republicans.
The country we love has slipped away and we have to get it back.
But it doesn't matter. Noble lie, right? As Charlie Kirk wrote in his 2020 book, The MAGA Doctrine,
to the extent that Trump is the defender and advocate of the United States, he functions as a vessel for Western civilization, which is humanity's best hope of living better than our distant ancestors.
The Claremont Institute understood that if they could make the case that literally all of civilization is on the line, then they could justify anything, even if it meant denying democracy itself.
Awesome, 3-2.
Throughout the 2020 election cycle, Trump teased his unwillingness to concede in any circumstance.
I have to give people wings.
And he accused Democrats of planning to steal the election. The stage was set. Then came the election. Biden wins the 2020 election, legitimately. Almost immediately, Trump challenges the results.
This is a fraud on the American public. Frankly, we did win this election.
First, deny, deny, deny. Confuse the system, flood it with accusations, lawsuits, anything to stall the election. And Trump wasn't going into this alone.
It's that he does these things in such a bumbling and unprofessional manner that they get by because people are expecting like a Moriarty or a Voldemort they can righteously rally against. When instead they get like a dementia-ridden old man who's just like, maybe we'll do it, maybe
how insane and illegal their plan was. Probably as illegal as the Trantifa headquarters me and my buddy.
Wettest ever from the standpoint of water.
To understand why Trump's plan was mind-bendingly illegal, it helps to understand a bit about American elections, which I know I'd also rather submerge myself in.
So like instead of it being like
Americans
the Joker shitting in your lunch, it's like, oh, Grandpa accidentally shit his pants.
Essentially,
but like,
once the American people vote for the president, then a bunch of other people called electors do the actual voting on behalf of the states that they represent. Under normal circumstances, this all looks really stupid and boring. Each state certifies its election results, appoints its official slate of electors, those electors meet in December to cast their votes, those votes are sent to Congress, and then they're counted and certified.
Yeah, this range shows
apparently that's the myth of consensual democracy. Isn't there a boomer pedophile you forgot to ask? Donald Trump wasn't happy with the results of the election. Unfortunately, instead of killing himself, Trump decided to overturn the election. For this, he enlisted the help of the now disgraced lawyer, John Eastman. Divorced Indiana Jones came up with a fascinating legal theory based on a loophole overlooked by constitutional scholars for centuries: making shit up. In states where Biden unequivocally won, Trump's team would send fake votes and start arguing that the fake votes should be counted. That's not my description, by the way. That's literally a quote from an email written by Trump's team. He just wrote it down. To which
it is interesting to me that the
rain
cover does cause light pollution, though. Like, you can't really see the map as well.
Smiley face emoji. Good thinking, Jack. The goal wasn't actually to prove that Trump won. They knew he didn't. The goal was to create enough confusion so that Mike Pence, as vice president, could claim that there was a dispute and either refuse to count certain states' votes or throw the election back to the House of Representatives. How do I know this? Because John Eastman wrote a memo documenting exactly how Trump plans to overthrow the election. Why do they keep writing this shit down? So, by the way, in case it wasn't clear, this was all illegal, and they knew it was illegal, and they kept sending emails saying they knew it was illegal. This doesn't even warrant being called a plot. This is literally just begging people to break the law for them. Like how Trump begged the governor of Georgia to just magically find the exact number of votes he needed to win.
We should have knocked him out and just put him in a fake White House. People could pay for the Trump channel, get all their entertainment.
Votes. I only need
and he could pretend to press buttons that don't really do anything, but instead we like actually gave him the chair.
We're saying that, that you've recalculated.
Which is cruel, isn't it? Wouldn't it be nicer and kinder to an old man who can't remember things?
Yeah, Trump and Eastman were repeatedly told that their scam was unethical,
wouldn't it be nicer to the country to give them someone competent?
Do you know what Eastman's justification was?
We are talking about whether we are going to, as a nation, completely repudiate every one of our founding principles.
Let's give this VTuber
which is what the modern left wing, which is in control of the Democrat Party, believes. This is an existential threat to the very survivability, not just of our nation, but of the example that our nation, properly understood, provides to the world. That's the stakes. And Trump seems to understand that in a way a lot of Republican establishment types in Washington don't. But at some point, the abuses have become so intolerable that it is not only their right, but their duty to alter or abolish the existing government.
Yep, that's the Claremont Institute's insane philosophy, actively informing the president's coup attempt. You might be wondering, hey, existential threats to the nation kind of imply a lot of violence, right? If we start messing with democracies, isn't that when violence starts happening? If we start implying that elections are stolen even though they aren't, doesn't that provoke violent uprisings? Yeah, I know, right? And that's exactly what White House counsel Eric Hirschman told John Eastman when they were cooking this shit up.
You're going to turn around and tell 78+ million people in this country that your theory is this is how you're going to invalidate their votes? Because you think the election was stolen.
We're going to just build more road. I don't think we're going to take on any more orders.
So you're going to cause riots in the streets. And he said words to the effect of there's been violence in the history of our country, Eric, to protect the democracy or protect the republic.
Oh. Trump, the Claremonters, and other maggots know that the inevitable outcome of their meddling with institutions and democracy would be explosive. And who was there cheering them on? Or actually not just cheering them on, but an active participant. Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk, once just a generic lib, but now cheering on the end of liberalism itself? Here's him doing just that with John Eastman on his podcast.
There is no escaping this. The only way is through, is defeat, is dismantling. This is an out-of-control administrative state.
Charlie was there, cheering from the sidelines, little by little turning up the temperature, teetering off a ledge, playing with fire.
But we have no choice. They have left us with no choice. They have declared, quote-unquote, the Roman Civil War, right? They crossed the Rubicon. So what are we going to do? Just say, well, you know, we're better than this. Man, the system is cracking in front of our eyes.
Testing how far the rhetoric could go, all to justify his own actual coup. Until, well, imagine it's January 2021 for some reason.
I do love the big picture scope of just seeing the forces that shaped
The entire conservative media apparatus has been bombarding its followers with misinformation about the election. Recently, Trump had been promoting a rally on January 6th to stop the steal.
Thanks for hanging.
In
We're
other
going to probably
words,
be wrapping
with me,
it soon.
Coup the government. Charlie
about
Kirk's
to restore
own
this
Turning
road,
Point
and then
Action
who knows?
offered free bus transportation to the rally. Trump tells his followers it's going to be wild. Then the day comes. January 6th, 2021, the culmination of the election scheme. Behind the plan is a legal
I think I have some leftover ceramics and metals I can
wanted
throw at
Mike
another
Pence
node
to
at
question
the
the
other
slate
edge,
of electors using Trump's false
what we can get away with before
the
shutting
hopes
down.
of sending the election over to Congress and eventually finally getting to, say
we
it
got
with
more
me,
road, gang.
coup the government. But they had
We
to
also added
pressure
one
Pence
sector
to
to the
actually
map.
go through with the plan. They needed a show of force. So Trump gathered a crowd of thousands of his followers in front of the Capitol on January 6th and inspired them with the language of peaceful democratic resistance.
We fight like hell.
It looks
and if
like
you
this
don't
goes
fight
over
like
to the
hell,
mine
you're
shaft
not going to have a
over
country
there.
anymore.
Oh, sorry.
But I think I can
didn't mean-
connect these
I don't
two
know how that got in
pieces.
there.
Let's go
Let's play
see.
the real
Let's go see.
Because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength and you have to be strong.
Sorry, my bad. Let's just skip to the part where
How
he
much
says
does Donald
there's gonna
Trump
be a peaceful
bench press?
transfer of power.
We will never give up. We will
Anyone
never
know?
concede.
Well, yeah, I don't know what's happening.
Let's have trial by combat.
I think you get it. After feeding their supporters a narrative of existential threat for months, this is the moment that they've been waiting for. Charlie Kirk was live streaming that day. He, of course, knew what was going to happen. They all knew what was going to happen.
This week is going to determine the future of our republic.
Naturally, he had his talking points loaded up. First, denounce the violence, obviously. Can't be held liable, right?
Folks have breached the Capitol's security parameters.
Which we do not support, and we completely denounce, and we think it's reprehensible.
In fact, deny that it's your side at all.
Okay? And by the way, we don't even know if these people
2 Big
are
Macs, so a half
conservatives
pound.
or Trump supporters or
Is that
what.
a quarter
we don't know who
pounder
these
with
people
or without
are, okay?
cheese?
Avoid responsibility, but also kind of justify it.
You
The
can
handsome
only
hamburger
insult
boy.
and poke people in the eye for so long until they're going to burst. You go after someone's country and you don't give them an explanation and it feels stolen and it feels just fraudulent. How do you think people are going to react?
Ultimately, the election wasn't overturned on January 6th, but it did accomplish one thing. In the aftermath, it became totally politically acceptable to question elections, to question our democracy, actually question democracy itself. And violence? Well,
We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
I do believe the Pixel Goblins will be going later tonight once we shut down here.
Who first wanted to destroy our
I don't
institutions.
remember
and they
if they're
got
doing
pretty damn
Vagrant Story
close.
on
Give me a
Tuesdays or
single
Thursdays,
quote
but
from
you can
Joe
always
Biden
tune in
or
there
a
for more
mainstream
looks.
Democrat, not some random
Also,
ass
tomorrow,
TikToker
we'll
that
be
is in
doing
any
fight
way,
opera
shape,
stuff,
or
so
form
keep an eye
as
out on the channel
destructive
for
as
that.
what Republicans have been getting away with for the past decade. And this wasn't an accident. This wasn't just the unfortunate and inevitable result of algorithms destroying our minds. No! Our violent and divisive political environment is the direct result of a small minority of elites so self-interested that they have poured billions of dollars into destroying this country. It is the result of the pundits who have stoked the flames of conflict in their direction.
This is how Satan plots and plans and deceives, and he has launched a virus, the woke mind virus, to destroy the greatest nation ever to exist in the history of the world. The demons of the woke.
This is the America that Charlie Kirk created.
258.
Conservatives are vultures who feed off American suffering.
Oh,
None of
936.
this
Let's just
was
go.
inevitable.
Let's finish this
was
road.
the work
Maybe
of
we can get
people
this
like Charlie
chunk done.
Kirk, the Claremont Institute, Donald Trump, and the billionaires behind them. And don't get me wrong, the neoliberal status quo wasn't working. Something needed to change. But the fact that it took the form of Trumpism, of Christian nationalism, right-wing populism,
just because I don't want to
authoritarianism,
leave y'all hanging this far
those are the
in, and
results
also
of the
I've been really
deliberate
enjoying
efforts
it.
of a tiny group of parasites. So where do we go from here? After losing in 2020,
Reminder to check
conservative
out
extremists
Alexander
began
Vinia's
refining
page and the
the
video in
big
full if you
conclusion
want
of
to
their
go back,
narrative.
see
What
stuff.
does that look like?
Hear
An
it
unabashed
in full
pursuit of
screen
Christian
without me
hegemony,
talking over
conservative
parts of it, all that good
the
stuff, you
destruction
know?
of social safety nets, and all power to the new vessel of Western civilization, Donald Trump and the new right.
When Trump won the election in 2024, Charlie Kirk was nearly brought to tears. For the past 3 years, TPUSA
Yeah,
and
how
other
will
extremist
America end?
groups
I don't know
have
where
been
they're going
refining
next
their
season.
new
I'm trying to
vision
check
of
out.
authoritarian governance. And this moment
Things got
promised
kind
to
of
bring it
silly
all
when they
together.
just
The plan
wrote
was
the old
actually
president
outlined
back
in
in.
Project 2025, an effort
Like in
on
a
the part
boring way,
of
not
dozens
in a
of
fun
conservative
way.
organizations to reimagine presidential power.
We're in Game of Thrones
The
season
overall
5.
vision
I'm waiting
was
for it to turn to season
replace
6.
workers in
you
government
know?
institutions with Trump loyalists. Remove
We're
as much friction
struggling
as
with
possible
the
between the
torturous
executive
Ramsay
branch
Bolton torture
and all the
scenes.
constitutional checks
We have
on
not
the
gotten
president's
Battle
power.
of the
Defund
Bastards
the
yet.
administrative state, which apparently has been compromised by woke experts.
The everyday American is smarter than you give them credit for. The bad guys, the oligarchs, the Joe Biden group, they believe that the experts are smarter than we even mention, and that the everyday rank and file citizen is dumber than the experts. We believe the wisdom is in the people.
Which, of course, isn't a good faith critique of the limits of political bureaucracy.
The wisdom is
in
in
reality,
the people.
Kirk and conservatives today don't really want to decentralize power. They want to privatize power and sell it to their
there even
billionaire
any
friends.
road nodes
Now, in
around here I can
2025,
plug
this is
into?
exactly what the second Trump administration has done. Strategic budget cuts that weaken our democracy and threaten American lives. Selling the military and surveillance apparatus to AI companies to target Americans. Slashing public health spending and redirecting those funds to unregulated wellness billionaires. Defund and privatize public education to replace it with Christian charter schools. Cutting environmental regulations so that the American oil industry prevails. Let's pause for a moment to appreciate how comically evil this is. They've proposed $1 billion in cuts to federal disaster preparation and
They've
response,
really chipped away at
which
the general
directly puts the lives
intelligence
of
rate of
millions of
American culture
Americans
to
at
be able to
risk.
get away
As
with
the
passing
climate
all this
crisis
stuff with
accelerates,
little
these
to
are the
no
types of cuts that
pushback,
will have
huh?
a lasting impact on American lives. I've actually partnered with Climate Power for this brief section of the video to help track what these cuts actually mean in real life.
Under the Trump administration, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, has lost about a quarter of its full-time staff, including important leadership roles like the head of the Storm Response Center. We've already seen delays in disaster response in places like Texas after deadly floods last year. That is, if disaster response comes at all. Trump is using FEMA aid as a political tool. He denied aid to Democratic states like Maryland and Washington without giving just cause. He threatened to withhold aid during the LA wildfires unless California gave him political concessions.
Hold funding to Los Angeles because of its sanctuary city policy.
I want to see two things in Los Angeles: voter ID, and I want to see the water be released.
This administration does not care about American lives. If Trump labels you a political enemy, your life does not matter to him. And, of course, Trump and his elite friends have found a way to financially benefit from all of this. Insurance companies are raising rates and canceling policies in areas facing extreme weather, at the same time that Trump threatens to withhold aid from these communities. So when disasters hit, vulnerable Americans find themselves without aid and without coverage. And why would Trump do anything to stop this when these same insurance companies have funneled millions of dollars into Trump's campaign? When, for him, disaster is a political opportunity. This country is being held hostage by billionaires and oligarchs who think American lives are just pawns in their political and financial
Noted
games.
for next time, though. I need these ceramics to be spent
Right-wing
elsewhere.
elites are destroying all public checks on private power to secure power for themselves, the extremist billionaires that have funded their movement for decades, and anyone else who proves total loyalty. This is how fascism is built. Oh, but according to MAGA, cronyism is the only way to defeat woke or something. Anyways, here's why we need to repeal the Civil Rights Act.
Once a week we talk about why the Civil Rights Act was a mistake.
Oh, sorry, is this all undemocratic and technically illegal? Well, no worries. Charlie Kirk has an argument for why the United States isn't actually a democracy.
Myth number one, we are not a democracy, nor should we be. So we are a constitutional republic with a democrat mechanism.
Oh, okay. Wait, but isn't a republic a form of democracy?
A democracy inherently means the centralization of power. A constitutional republic respects the decentralization of powers.
Right, exactly. We need to decentralize power. That's why Trump is sending the military into democratic cities.
Federalize Washington, D.C. Bring in the Marines. Call in the Insurrection Act. We need full military occupation of these cities until the crime desists.
How did Charlie get to this point? A man who used to believe in small government, liberty, freedom, decentralization, states' rights, all of that thrown out the window to defend a man who would send the military to coerce private citizens during peacetime? Are you serious?
Once we liberate D.C., you better believe it. Chicago, New York, Boston, Philadelphia, Portland, San Francisco, we got a big military.
Are you stupid? By the second Trump administration, Kirk had clearly abandoned all of his principles, and even quit his job to swallow Trump's loads full time. It seems the entire Republican Party abandoned its principles. At this point, one has to wonder what vision of America Charlie's conservatism
good thing
is
I put
trying
that
to
emergency
preserve.
battery on it.
If it isn't freedom or liberty or individual rights, then what? The answer lies.
Well, like the most intense thing this session, and it wasn't even a firefight. It was my truck running out of battery, but me having the right backup gizmos.
Who exactly is that enemy?
Always be
well,
prepared.
at first it was Antifa.
I'm not going to follow that
illegal
advice. I'll probably be
trans people,
grossly
far-left
unprepared for
radicals,
something Thursday because
these
of that.
minority groups who are
We will
easy
see.
to target. But post-January 6th, something shifted. American voters realized that actually they don't like it when their political leaders try to end democracy. But that's not a problem for conservatives because conservatives have simply stopped caring about being popular. Instead, what if the list of non-Americans just needs to grow? And since they've already built
being
the argument
popular
for
when
why
you can be
enemies to
awful.
America need to be destroyed at all costs, well then, any action is on the table. Do you think you're safe? Glenn Elmer's Claremont Director of Research wrote in March of 2021,
Fewer are willing to take the next step and accept that most people living in the United States today, certainly more than half, are not Americans in any meaningful sense of the term, who may technically be citizens of the United States, but are no longer, if they ever were, Americans. They do not believe in, live by, or even like the principles, traditions, and ideals that until recently defined America as a nation and as a people. It is not obvious what we should call these citizen aliens, these non-American Americans,
Ooh, there
but
is
they are
sadly
something
a
else.
lot more of this video left, gang, and I do see the camera battery blinking, and it is a little past 6, so
some citizens, even most
I think that's as much time as I'm going to have allotted for Death Stranding today. Let's see what road. Okay, cool. We built
a distinctive place in a distinctive people.
a pretty thorough
Our shared
nervous
qualities,
system.
our heritage, our values,
Also,
our
we have
manners
this
and
all the way over
customs
here.
confer
Yeah,
a special
yeah, look at that
and
overworld.
indispensable advantage.
Who do you think conservatives refer to when they say America
So
the
we're
people?
at 2:02 of 2:55. There's still another 50 minutes. Sadly, I don't think I'll be able to let the session run that long. I'll put this on our Discord as I did in the chat. As a reminder, we're going to be watching Ghost in the Shell 2 this weekend on the Discord. We're going to be watching On the Silver Lake, The Postman, Under the Silver Lake, not On the Silver Lake. We watched On the Silver Lake. We're going to be watching a few things, including Walkabout, The Postman, Under the Silver Lake, Ghost in the Shell 2. It's all part of this whole fall into the future Join us here again on Thursday. I'll have more of Parable of the Talents read. I'll have more to talk about regarding Lauren and her adventure. For those of you following along with Parable of the Talents, we read through the first 5 chapters. I'm hopefully going to get through the next 5 in the next 2 days. It's a brisk read, so it seems pretty feasible unless something shocking and surprising comes up. But yeah, we'll be back to talk books Thursday. See y'all then. Take care. Techno hotties.